Hello. How is everyone today? I am Lori Webb and I am here representing the Entrepreneur Hotline. I hope that you will be enjoying a week's worth of opportunity to connect with entrepreneurs and to be able to ask questions, to learn from, and to do a host of things. In a minute, I'll be joined by Colin Scotland, one of my host colleagues, and we'll be here for this first segment, this opening segment, to see about how this is going to work. As I've mentioned in some of the text that has been sent around, this is a pilot project. This is building while flying in the true entrepreneurial spirit. We will be um, testing this. We are using new platforms, and that we have some hiccups here and there. I hope that you will be understanding of that. So I am waiting for Colin to get in, and let me just check to make sure everything's cool. I'm gonna be going back and forth with this. So this is going to be part of how it's going down. This is not a presentation as much as this is at this state part of the time where we're open for who's online and who might need some guidance or have some questions or have some comments and who would like to interact with us. So, yes, let's see. I can't see what's happening, so when I'm checking this. So I'm hoping that please let me know if you can hear me. Um, I am just following up here. And and this is going to be a long week. I can tell you that. Let's see if I have the possibility to get Colin on here. So, in the meanwhile, I am going to be using this a lot. So, maybe I should also take this here so there's no feedback in the case that this happens. To see. hmm See what's happening. Okay, I am live. My voice. Yeah, my voice is a little bit rattly. I actually haven't been feeling so well, so this is also one of the things we are going to be experiencing, and that is when you are an entrepreneur, you simply have to experience sometimes a little bit of difficult things. This is also one of the things we are going to be experiencing, and that is when you are an entrepreneur, you simply have to experience sometimes a little bit of difficult things. Hi, how are you? I am having some difficulties getting out of this. I'm trying to get into my Facebook, but I have something going on and it's locking me out. So I hope that you'll bear with me. I am. I don't know where you are. I hope that your day is going well. I am having some difficulties getting out of this. I'm trying to get into my Facebook, but I have something going on and it's locking me out. So I hope that you'll bear with me. I am. I don't know where you are. I hope that your day is going well. Wow. Why can't I leave this? Here we are. I'm getting a message. Checking. So the burning question is, if I can try to invite, I'm going to see if I can do this. Also on another computer, not my own, and that's causing some trouble. Now, here's the deal. If you're curious, I'm going to wait a few minutes to get some of these what do you call it? Not wrinkles, but hiccups or whatever, what have you, in order to get this kick-started. It's 8 o'clock in England. I believe they are kickstarting their Global Entrepreneurship Week as well. It's 9 o'clock in Copenhagen, which is where I'm based. And Gail, our other host, it's 4 in the morning, I believe, her time. She's in New York. So this is going to be quite a feat in just scheduling some of these things. It's been a bit of a challenge because of the fact that you have people from so many different time zones who are involved in the project that when you're calculating the times, you're not always thinking about somebody else's time zone. And sometimes when we send out the alerts, people are thinking in their own time zones and not realizing that we were navigating in another time zone. So yeah, that can definitely be a challenge. I'm going to be adding this here and see if this will work. Oops. I think we have two here. So what are the most important things for you when it comes to entrepreneurship, in terms of if you're thinking of starting a business, what are the things that are holding you back? And if you are in a business, what are the things that are really your main challenges? That's where we can give you the most value, I believe, throughout this week. We will also be sharing insights and different tools and techniques that you'll be able to leverage to start or improve your business. And that's going to be super helpful for many of you out there. So let's see, I'm sending this email. You can't see, I'm not sharing my email with you. I don't think that's really relevant to kind of, but I am going to, so I'm not just spending the time here. I am about to add Colin. Colin!
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm actually not feeling fresh, but I'm doing what entrepreneurs do. I'm showing up and I'm getting it done anyway.
Yeah, doing it anyway. Doing it anyway. That's the thing, Laurie. Hey.
Yes. So, I mean, right now it's you and I, and we're kicking it off this early. It's not that early here. It's 9 o'clock, so it's not that early. But this early morning, the beginning of the Entrepreneur Hotline, we wanted to do this to support entrepreneurs during Global Entrepreneurship Week to test this idea of providing value 24/7 for entrepreneurs. We're not sure how it's going to play out, but we are definitely giving it a go. And we have some great guests who will be coming on. And Colin and Gail, who is our third host, who, as I mentioned earlier, is in Eastern Standard Time, so is hopefully still awake, still sleeping, will be joining us for a host forum in a few hours. And we will, kind of see how things are going after the first couple of sessions and see how we best can provide value. Now, I am Lori Webb, and I come from INSPOC, which is to inspire, inform, motivate, uh, yeah, kicking the butt as necessary. And I look like I'm falling out of the screen as a side note. I can see it, but I'll have to adjust in a second. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on me, and that is just in what I do. This is a version of the things that I do. It's to think outside of the box and to give people an opportunity for platform. I'm not going to say so much because I'm looking at my co-host face. I'd like to have him introduce himself a little bit more, and then we're going to engage in some yes, fresh banter. I don't know. What do you call it? Go
No,
ahead, Colin.
nice. Thank you, Laurie. So I'm Colin Scotland, and my mission is simple. I exist to help others to become the person that they seek to become. It was a quote that I heard from Seth Godin a while back, and it really resonated with me so much because I'm a marketing coach, and people think of marketing as, make money online and all of these like hard-nosed businessy type approaches to business, right? I'm kind of the anti-business marketing coach, and I work to essentially help people become who they seek to become, and that's kind of my mission. That's what I'm driven by, and so the opportunity to be present and available and around and add some value and bring some cool tips and learnings and failings and all of those things. That sounded interesting, right? So that's kind of what we're here for during this week.
Wonderful. Thanks. And I love that. I love the marketing guy or anti-business. How did you say that again? How?
Yeah, I listen. My goal, Laurie, was always to create an anti-business because I hate. I don't know why, but like pinstripes. Business to me is such a serious word, and I've always hated it because it conjures up images of people in pinstripe suits and the very like buy sell, like the very serious element, and to me that's not what life or business is all about. I've found through experience, and so my mission now is creating an anti-business business, and I take that approach with everything that I do, right? So it's swimming against the current.
Yes. And I
Mm.
love it. Yes, I'm a salmon myself. I guess we could say. And and I think that one of the most important conversations to be having and to bring to light is this concept, especially for entrepreneurs. And when I say entrepreneurs, you and I have had multiple conversations over the years about different aspects of being an entrepreneur, the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think the key thing for me is that entrepreneur has been discussed so much in the business environment as a science. It's more about the managerial aspects of the entrepreneurial venture, as opposed to the really core critical things. I think because when it comes to the more practical business things, those things can come and go. Don't you think? They're you'll have. I mean, money comes and goes. Tools come and go, but some of the key principles are really like you must be conscious of your own well-being. You must be conscious of the things that are, when you start a venture, you have the opportunity to design it so that it fits into your life and so that it makes your life work. And too many entrepreneurs end up working as a slave in their own business and put themselves and their relationships at risk, and that's a difficult thing.
Definitely, I think this is part of the driver of what I said about the anti-business, because all too often we have something exciting that we want to follow, we want to pursue, we want to play with, and it can just lead us down a pathway that can be almost unhealthy for us as a human being, because we are, as entrepreneurs, we're naturally like, we're high achievers, we're ambitious, we love to do new things, learn new things, immerse ourselves into what, the things that are going on in the moment and stuff like that. But there can be a tendency to lose the important things in all of that, because let's face it, right? Business entrepreneurship, in the scheme of who we are as human beings, it's only a small piece of it, right? So you've got to have an understanding and appreciation of the wider elements of being human. That's what this is all about. If you can acknowledge, nurture, love, and grow as a human being, your business grows as a result. And that took me a while to realize, actually, Laurie. Going headlong into stuff, just thinking about business, led me down many a dark alley over the years that, I think, man, I wish I'd have known this back then and not wasted all that time, right?
But that being said, I mean, the only way through it is through it, right? Like you can't know what you don't experience,
Mm,
and especially, being of a certain age, you have experienced some things, and I've experienced some things, and when you're young, um, young people, pay attention. When you're young, often, the world is your oyster. You think that the advice that people are sending, the experiences that people are saying, especially things that you don't want to hear, things that you don't like, you're like, that's not gonna, I'm going to be the exception. I'm going to be the one who gets it all figured out on the first go. I'm going to be the one who gets through this unscathed. I'm going to be the one who's able to um to avoid the trauma. They, that was their experience, and yeah, they're old. What are they? What do they know about modern life? What do they know about
mm,
right now? Right,
mm, mm.
and that's key to
Definitely.
understand.
Yeah, my mother-in-law, God rest her soul, she used to say, "Colin, you can't put an old head on young shoulders." And I think when you are
That's a good one.
young, you do feel like, what do you know? You know nothing, and so you do tend to plow on regardless. And I think that's a beautiful thing,
Yes.
because it gives you that freedom to just do, rather than be stuck in the mud, which we get all too often in what we do. It's beautiful in that sense, but also you can end up down so many dead ends, which is part of the journey. It's part of the
Yeah.
thing. I think there has to be in everything, there has to be a balance, doesn't there, of having that single-mindedness and that determination to do, but you've also got to have that reflective look back, appreciate, understand, and be aware of what's going on in the bigger picture. That's the thing, I think, that you can't put onto a young shoulders, right? Or
Yeah.
it takes time and experience to develop, don't you think?
Absolutely, and I agree with what you say. I think it. Well, that is why many of us do the things that we do when we're young, because we dare to, and contrary to, or what do you call it, the opposite. You can't put a old head on young shoulders, but you also can't put a young head on old shoulders, which is to say, I don't mean you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but you can't take the experience out of the experienced. And so that is what makes sometimes the older generation or older generations more complacent or more fearful of changing things, because they know what can go wrong, because they have a lot more to that they're putting on the line to lose. The risk is higher, and there are usually a larger group of people relying on them, so they feel more trapped often. Like, oh, I'm going to stay in this job that I've hated for 10, 20 years because my family depends on the income, because I need it for, to cover the things that we were told were important. Now, the new generation is less attached to buying the house, buying the car, and all these things. They're thinking in new ways. So that's a great advantage for them. So I guess my point is, I basically, I'm going to do this all the time. You probably know this, but for me, it's always about context and it's perspective. And and everyone and everybody has something to bring to the table. Everybody's experience, even when it's inexperience, is something that can be of value in the right context. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is context and perspective is critical in all of this, because you may go, oh, it's okay for you because of X, Y, and Z. And if you put yourself into the shoes of that person, they would go, yeah, but I've not got this and I didn't have that and I've not got this. And so we all see the world in a very distinct way, don't we? We all see the world. I've not got my glasses on right now, but through our lens, the lens with which that makes us up as a human being. And that, I think, that creates that view of the world. And so the whole point of being reflective as an entrepreneur, as a human being, is this idea that you are able to appreciate and understand the bigger picture outside of that little myopic view of the world that we all have trapped inside of this bag of skin, right?
Yes. Yes.
Fascinating.
I really
Fascinating.
think so. I think that I really will hope that people will take this opportunity while we're live streaming, uh, to to actually have an opportunity to have a chance to hear a different take and many different takes on what it means to be an entrepreneur, how people define it, how people live it, how people experience it, and how also uh, how governments or how universities or how institutions also understand it, and how connected that is to the reality or where there are the disconnects. I think there's going to be a lot of uh, of people on who can address some of these issues, and we have a lot of people who are going to be talking about more practical things like doing live video, like um, taking, like managing your money, like coming, how to get funds, like, I don't know. There's a whole it's a mixed pot of people who are sharing, and a mixed pot of topics that they'll be sharing. And I'm sure that as the week goes on, some of those will also morph as we see what people want to hear and need.
That's the beauty of taking imperfect action, Laurie. That's the beauty of playing in the sandpit, or the sandbox, as they call it in the States. Playing in the sandbox with ideas. And I think one of the key things, you mentioned
Uh-oh.
something really
Yep.
interesting before. You talked about the perspective, and when you're at the older end of the entrepreneurial spectrum in terms of age, or the younger end, the way that perspective shifts. And one of the key things for me is, regardless of where you are, it's having this mentality and this mindset of curiosity. Like a child, if you unleash a child into a sandpit or a sandbox with playthings, they'll make stuff, they'll be digging in the sand, they'll be building castles, they'll be watching them fall over and laughing and having fun and being playful. And so I think that there's a lot we can learn from that wherever we are in the journey, and having that sense of play, that sense of curiosity, is so critical, isn't it? And this is where that stands you in such great stead, more so than tools and techniques and stuff like that, because that is the philosophy that will allow you to do amazing things in the world. And it's such a powerful outlook that I think is it's one of the things that's only really lit up for me in the last few years, really, Laurie, in the last few years. And it's been a pivotal thing that has changed my outlook on everything. Because the reality of entrepreneurship is there are so many strands to it. It's quite, there are, excuse me, so many areas, so many parts of the, you just in what you mentioned there, my head was spinning about finance and tools and all of these different things. And it's like, whoa, that just sends me spinning in like a whirlwind of stuff. And I think having that natural curiosity about stuff and allows you not to be overwhelmed by the breadth of things that go on in the journey, but having that curiosity to say, okay, so we're going to look and understand like finance and numbers, and let's play in the sandpit, let's play in the
Yes.
sandbox with numbers so that I can at least build a little rudimentary castle, right? I
Yeah.
don't need to be an expert creating these art sculptures of sand, but
Yes.
enough to be able to understand and take my business where it wants to go. And so if you have that philosophy, no matter what the area is that you're playing with, and it doesn't have to be business, right? It can be life, it can be all of the things that what make us who we are. It's
Yes.
cool.
And
Mm.
I also think that that in using that now analogy of being in the sand pit, also being in the sand pit and being inspired by others. And so, there are those that are really good at, who will sit down in the sand and start initiating things. And there are those who are really good at looking at what's being made and coming in and tweaking and, oh, we could also do this. And it's also down to opportunity. Sometimes it can even be the same people. It's just when it's the timing. It's when they come into a project, and to enjoy and to play is such a good thing, and something I think we're seeing across, not only in the entrepreneurial space but across spaces and industries everywhere, is because life has just gotten too stressful for people. People have to let go a little bit, and that's why we are seeing so much focus on mindfulness and wellness and well-being and psychological and mental health. All these things are coming to the fore, because I think it's like a pendulum swinging, that for so long we kind of lost ourselves, and our humanity got lost in trying to make the money, trying to make the get the accolades, trying to do all of these things, and also going to a after basically the industrial revolution created the system of our education system, around the world, and especially in the Western world, or I can speak mainly to the American experience, that being trained, in that education system has been about making workers, making people who were yes men, people who said okay, next gadget, next one, two. You needed people who would be a part of the system and not
Mm.
rock the boat, because that would be very inefficient and cause a lot of problems. But in this day and age, while there are certain elements of that, of course, that are critical and key, but we have more of a need for the sandbox people, the kids, the play, the adult players, because what we did and the way we acted through that whole earlier time can be outsourced, can be created in a computer program. The things that can't be created are the things that are the more complex human emotions and complex experiences and ideas about like doing different things that you can't what do you call it, pre predict. Yeah, just predict. I was trying to get fancy.
Pre-predicting would be clever, wouldn't it? Because that's even predicting before we even predicted, right?
Yeah, say that 3 times fast.
Yeah. I like it.
Exactly.
I like
So
it.
I think there's some idea to that
Mm.
it would be helpful for people to think about that. Um, Also, I mean, how do you were talking about like the playfulness, and you talk about these realizations over time. Now, I feel like I've always been kind of a play box, like somebody in the play box, in the in building sandcastles, or
Mm.
almost to uh, to um, to my own detriment at times, because people want you to you know stay in your lane at times, and it's hard to stay in your lane when you know think like this. and you want to explore, and it's also balance. So I mean, we talked about perspective and context, and that's very, very critical, but also the idea of balancing oneself. Because when I say when I speak to colleagues, or especially from former colleagues from academia about entrepreneurship, or have these discussions with people who are more traditional in their thinking, uh, they they I think they get a bit defensive when I say, entrepreneurship isn't about, it's not about the business, not about the science. We don't, we should be focusing on something else. I'm not saying that we should be focusing on something else instead of. I'm saying we should focus on something else to add to the conversation, and also to look at where it actually occurs. Now, in your experience, do you also, I mean, this is something I've asked a lot of people, and I believe I know your answer, but I find that, especially in the impetus of starting something, to me, creation is not a science. Creation is an art. To create is to be an art. It's an art, or artistic, or a even spiritual experience. Creation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas I think the entrepreneurial journey, once it gets to a certain level, demands the more scientific aspects, demands managerial processes, things that you're doing specifically. And I think that is probably one of the biggest issues for most entrepreneurs, especially solo entrepreneurs, who, by their own, well, because they're thinking, I'll learn all of these things. I'll just become good at all of these things because it will save me money. And what happens is they get caught up, because that's not their area of expertise. It's not only is it not their expertise, because that's not the problem. The problem is it's they don't like it, and it's not their expertise. And so when you don't like something, we know you try to avoid it, or you hum and you ha, and it takes a lot more energy. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
if you had, this idea of also having the team that supports your skill set, a team that's good at the things that you are not good at. It's great to, be in a room. We're always talking about, let's get together with like-minded people. And I think that is important, to get together with like minded people, but I think it's as important to get together with not like minded people. Because when you get together with like minded people, then you get people to say yes to the things that you also say yes to. And then there are things that go missing because nobody's thinking about them, or connected to them. Does that
Mm-hmm.
is that resonate anyway?
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned a couple of things there that that really struck me, Laurie. The first one is about creativity, and the second one is about collaboration, right? And so the first one, creativity. If you think about it, we all play with, as entrepreneurs, we're playing with new things, new ideas, learning new things. It's how we're wired, right? We play and we learn, and we're like a cat. Where's my little ball? We're like a cat chasing the ball, right? A cat's like that. Oh, it's over there. And we find ourselves like that a lot. And so that can be fun because we can enjoy it, but it can also be perplexing and frustrating and overwhelming as well, because we end up down rabbit holes of learning things that we don't understand, and all of that fun stuff. But this is where this sense of curiosity and child, the connecting with the inner child, that whole like playfulness is such a powerful concept. Because if you think about it, how refreshing would it be to you if we said, hey, all you need to do in your day is to play. I have this on my desk, right?
Nice.
And
Hmm.
so one of the first things I do with my coaching clients is I I get them to do this every day, structure it into their day. So
Mhm.
build in at least 30 minutes of focused energy where the internet gets turned off, your headphones go on, you play some alpha wave music to get you into that zone, and you just focus on doing something that's creative, whether it's writing content, creating content, playing the guitar, singing, drawing, whatever it is, get connecting with that
Yeah.
creative part of your being is the key to unlocking that childlike curiosity piece that we talked about.
Yes.
But also how refreshing to know that you can focus on that playfulness and that thing
Mhm.
that is almost doesn't feel like, well, it doesn't feel like work when you're in that zone of creation. There's something magical, and you mentioned something almost spiritual about it. And
Mhm.
so for me, the more I can play in that space, the
Mhm.
less I have to worry about the spider web that is running a business of teams and systems and processes and all of that kind of stuff. I can focus on, at least for that window of time every single day, playing in that creative sandpit, creative space, having fun. And to me, that's like somebody taking a weight off my shoulders and going, and I get this sense of, and I see it, my clients get it as well. They're
Yeah.
like going, yeah, but how do I make that into a podcast? And then how do I record this and send this to there and all of that? And I'm like, whoa, stop a sec. Just take a breath. Your only mission is to do this, to play in that sandpit for that period of time. If it's 30 minutes or it's an hour or whatever that is,
Mhm.
that's all you've got to focus on. And that just takes that weight off, because you can do the thing that you're amazing at, and you get to play. It's like cheating. It's not like work when it's like that. And that
Yes.
that to me is so critical in all of this, that you stay connected to that, and that's linked to the whole mindfulness, well-being, all of that cool stuff that we're going to be talking about as well.
Mm.
And then the second thing, if I may, the second thing that you mentioned is collaboration. So yeah, we're building this castle, and then somebody next to us says, "Oh, why don't you add this onto there? And why don't you use this bucket instead to make this tower bigger?" And all of these cool things. And if you think about that idea of collaboration, of appreciating and taking advantage of the connections with other people,
Yeah.
that's when we're able to literally move mountains, when
Yes.
we connect, because we are stronger together. It's undoubted. The human race is where it is today, not because of one single human being, but because of the collective.
Yes.
Academics, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Because of the stuff that and the work that's gone on before. So understanding and appreciating that as an entrepreneur is critical, especially when you get to the place where you've got teams of people that you're working with, you've got whether it's just outsourced or whether it's your own team, whatever that looks like, we are all working collaboratively. Even if we're a freelancer, we're working collaboratively. We've got clients, we've got people that we speak to, we've got networks. And so, this idea of connectedness as an entrepreneur, I think, is critical as well, to really have a solid appreciation of. So,
Yes.
I loved your commentary there, Laurie. It was great. It was great.
Well, yes. Well, you and I, we can riff and go back and forth. We are like-minded and and not like-minded at the same time. Like-minded and not like-minded. So it's a good mix.
Mm.
Different approaches, and of course, because of the experiences. Now, that's something, from this brings me to the research that I've been doing on my book, which is still slated to come out at the end of the year. One postponement, so many things. And this is a real, like, critical lesson learned. And that is, and I see it coming up a lot now that, with social media, and you have especially Instagram posts that are going through all the time. There are a lot of people who are trying to get people on board with this predefined notions of success and the basic, what do you call it, the pitfalls. And while, to speak to, like, this is, I've said to several people at this point, like, this event and also this book that I've been working on, they're basically like huge public failure, failure attempts, attempts at overcoming failure, public failure, getting over yourself, getting through it, and and because of a dedication to something that, even though it's not comfortable, nobody ever wants something to not go the way that go to plan or get delivered on time. But there's also something really critical in, if you really believe in the work that you're doing, and people might not always understand what you're doing, and so sometimes the time element is in there. And one of the things I say often is, and I don't even know why I came up with this in my head, but this expression is not mine. It's not over till it's over. But my application in terms of people who get so worried about hitting certain, I need to do this by this time. I need to, I'm chasing success. So I need to be on this list to know that I'm successful. I need to earn this amount of money to know I'm successful. I need to have a mate to know that I'm successful. I need to, have been in a relationship for X amount of time, X amount of years, or I need to have X amount of children, or I need to not have X amount of children, or I need to not have, depending on how people define their success criteria. But I believe that really, even after we die, we don't even know. Like, if you think of, in terms of the impact that you make on the world, I believe everybody makes an impact. Everybody makes an impact on somebody just by being born, right? Everybody makes an impact. But when it
Mm.
comes to these, doing these things and having success, or attempting to get success, you don't really know until it ends. I mean, people who are together end up not together. So is that successful? Like, if you're together for 40 years and then you separate, or is that a failure? It depends on when if you have $1 million in your bank account on Monday and you are -5 on Thursday, and then back up on Sunday. I mean, it depends on when people are doing the litmus test, right?
Mm. And it also depends on how you measure success. What is success?
Yes.
What is success to you? That's the important question here.
And
Because
I think also, to add to it, I'm sorry I cut you off,
that's okay.
but but not only is what is success to you, it's what is success to you and what can you stand in your ground for. Because I think a lot of people have an idea of success and get swayed by the popular understanding of success. They get influenced by other people's success. And that has also, speaking about children growing up, and basic, or looking at our generation and thinking, how many people do we know? I mean, how many? I know a lot of people who have ended up working for long period, basically their whole lifetime, on behalf of the success of somebody else. So they might have started to become a doctor, lawyer, accountant. These are the classic ones people bring up.
Mm.
Not so much because they had a love for these things, but because they wanted to make mommy or daddy proud, right? Or because, their favorite uncle was X, Y, or Z. And, they wanted to, they thought that looked good. And I think we sometimes get swayed from, I think, from being children to growing up, we often get, a lot gets socialized out of us. Creativity gets socialized out of us. Innovation and entrepreneurial spirit gets socialized out of us. Also, this intuitive nature that I believe that we're born with, gets we stop hearing ourselves. We're so busy listening to the other voices because we're actually told throughout school, or we used to be told throughout school, to to be quiet, to simply, um, listen, you know, this is, what did you speak when spoken to? And then and these are the right answers. And you go through a school system and you go through society, and depending on where you are in that society, you don't see a full picture of the world, right? If when I was younger, you look at maps of the world, right? America is at the center of the map in the United States, right? Whereas when you move, they change the perspective. When you're in Europe, Europe is kind of the center of the map, right? And I think it goes from place to place, so you don't get a full perspective. And I think that when you're not able to tap into who you are, and I think that's why, again, this mindfulness and things are coming to a fore, because people are suffering so much from it now that they're not able to hear themselves. They are not trusting their own gut feelings about things, and it's tripping them up.
It's difficult as well when you start looking at who you are, what you've got, what you've not got, and then looking around at people who are doing better, who are doing worse against that singular measure. It's always very difficult, that, because it doesn't matter whether you've got $1 in the bank or $100 million in the bank. There's always somebody with more money in the bank or less money in the bank. There's always a whole swathe of people at either side of wherever you see yourself in that singular measure. And so what I think is really critical in this is Jordan Peterson, the guy that wrote the 12 Rules for Life, which is a beautiful book that I recommend everybody reads. It's an amazing read. He talks about not comparing yourself with others. Rather, what we should do is and this is linked to what you were saying about mindfulness and well-being and all of these cool things, but we should compare ourselves with who we are today against who we were yesterday, and how are we different in that respect. That to me that makes me go, oh man, I don't need to compare myself with that person or that person or that person. I can just focus on being a better version of me.
Yes.
So that I can go, yeah, man, I didn't exercise today, or I ate bad yesterday, or whatever that thing is, right? Today I'm going to do better. Today I'm going to put my running shoes on and I'm going to go out for 30 minutes and do a run. Today I'm going to work on that part of my business that I know needs love and attention, and I'm going to do that today. And that's my measure of playing in the sandpit for a time, is going to be the thing that I measure against and get a check mark, so that I feel good, get that positive endorphin and start propelling things forward. There's so many little things like that just can give you that momentum that you need, that can just kickstart that process, so that we don't end up lost in this sea of, oh man, but I'm not this and I'm not that, and I've not got this and I don't have that, and maybe when I get this I'll do that, and all of that nonsense that keeps us away from what's going on right now and right in front of us.
Exactly. I think also it gives you agency, because you have no control over anybody else. So if you are, it's all about what I'm doing and how I'm, I would like to, whether it's, I want to improve my fitness, I want to improve my, communication skills, I want to improve my, something specific in my business, my, my ability to use certain tools, or my ability to manage, certain aspects of my business, be better with, the finances, or be better with the administrative task, all these different things that we have, that you can, or be better to outsource, or be better at getting that, asking for help when you need help, or be better at maybe taking a beat and trying to figure it out yourself before you think you automatically need help, or stop buying programs all the time.
That's something.
Know that you know enough. Like sometimes, like we get caught up, and it's easy to think, even like it's crazy how you will discard your, like it. I think it would be really helpful. Entrepreneurs would do well to really get a solidified sense of self, and get some support around that. I really do think that makes all the difference, because if you know what you know, and you know that you are good at it, and you've developed some skills, especially over time. And I know so many people who are basically experts in an area, and I'm not saying, like, it's really important. Nobody knows everything, and nobody knows everything. Like, you can be an expert today and not be an expert, tomorrow, theoretically, because things, depending on what you're an expert in, right, and how things go. But you it's good, while it's good to always be searching and learning, there's also a danger, and also there's a wasted energy in relearning things that you actually know. Like, in a school system, you wouldn't go back to third grade and try to, like, listen in on the teacher, because you've already accomplished that. But in the entrepreneurial space, myself and others that I know, but really myself really badly, I like to see what people are doing. So I will buy programs, and they're programs that I could teach. They're programs I have taught. But it's like, ooh, how are they doing that? And some of the things that it just seems so, it's like, oh, so nice. And it feels like, I don't know. I sometimes think I replaced my shopaholism, like my clothes habit, with my brain habit, right? It's like it feels more legit. Like, if you go
Mm.
out and you spend a lot of money on clothes, then people, you can feel guilty. I'm not supposed to care about what people think, but it's hard. Like, if you're going out and you're investing in your brain, it's hard to say, like, that's something that you can't, it can't go away. Investing in your brain, within a brain, of course, that that functions well, and can retain the information, that's a good investment. It's always a good investment to invest in yourself. However, I think I'm, raising a red flag if you are so busy investing in your education and you're not doing. If
Mm.
you're so busy learning and not trusting your gut to perform, or you get, paralyzed by the overwhelm of all the information. I think that's something we need to consider.
I think there's two pieces to that, isn't there? There's the idea of being lost, educating yourself. Yeah, that's a good thing. But then if you are not educating yourself in the right areas, or you're not actually then taking action with the stuff that you're educating yourself with, then it's just you're lost in a loop of effectively procrastinating, aren't you? Because
Yeah.
you're not fulfilling the thing that you're on this earth to do. What's that? What is that thing? That to me means that you need that stake in the ground, that surety, that anchor at your core to say, hey, this is why I'm on this earth as a human being. This is the thing that I'm here to do. This is the thing that I'm driven by. This is the thing that I want to change in the world. These are the people that I want to help. Whatever that is, if you're sure and certain about that, then that draw of that duty and that anchor of that why outweighs, like, the idea of playing with this thing and then that thing and then this thing, and that becomes a thing in and of itself. Yes, it's amazing to have education, but it's got to be balanced, like you said earlier, Laurie, hasn't it? It's got to be balanced with action, and action that's driving you forward as a
Mhm.
human being, as an entrepreneur, for the things that are important to you. Otherwise,
Yeah,
what's the point, right?
exactly. I
Mm.
actually say that to some of my clients, is that, well, you keep telling me that you want to go to Spain, but you keep standing in the line to go to Norway.
Mm.
Like, people, in terms of the one thing, if you want to move ahead, you need to be preparing yourself to move ahead. You can't just say, I want to, so some of these, the idea of, if you're aiming to get a place, you have to put yourself in that place. psychologically. You have to, you see it, right? You can't do anything before you can see that you can actually do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole point of vision. And if you don't think, like, what's the famous quote? If you believe it, or if you don't believe it, it's true. I'm not sure who says it. I think I also paraphrased it, but the essence, it's a very, very popular quote. Sorry, whoever said it. I osmosisized. I made up that word. I osmosisized it.
Love that word. I love that word.
But it's true that if how can you expect to achieve something, especially really, really hard? And as we spoke about earlier, the journey of entrepreneurship, it's a there's a lot to it. So if you to have the momentum to do the things, especially when it's the difficult things, especially when it's the things that you struggle with, um, that you lack support around, then the only thing that's going to get you through it is, in fact, that you have that burning desire, that you have that, you know, this this commitment, this dedication, this belief, this real power within you to keep moving forward. I think that's yeah, that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've got to be connected with what's driving and motivating you as a person, haven't you? Why are you building a business? Why are you an entrepreneur? Why are you an entrepreneur? Why are you doing what you do? What's the whole purpose of it? And I think
Yes.
that's a question that is so important in having that reflective aspect that gives you. It's only going around in a circle like that you get that surety and certainty of who you are and why you're here and what difference you're seeking to make in other people's lives.
Yes.
What is that for you? That's a critical question that we all ask. And no matter how together somebody else looks, I guarantee we are all swans. We're all works in progress. So the swan glides across the water looking amazing, looking elegant, looking beautiful, but underneath their feet are going like this, right?
Right.
And we're all like that. We're all
Yeah.
a work in progress. I've
And I
had
love, oh, I'm
sorry, go on.
sorry.
No,
I
no, you
love
go.
that you said the thing about the swans, because
Yeah.
I actually have a whole shtick, a whole thing about I love, as a side, I love children's literature. I've always loved children's literature. Had considered really going that route in school at one point. I took classes, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, and being in Denmark, Hans Christian Andersen, home of the ugly duckling,
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, wow, that is the entrepreneur, the ugly duckling. So you were talking about the swan. Once the swan is, adult and looking graceful, but the swan starts off not. I mean, the swan is apparently not very beautiful. I think they look fine, but let's compare to some birds,
Mm-hmm.
right? They often birds actually do grow into themselves, and so I think that's I to me, looking at children's literature, there's certain words, there's certain truths that I see. I feel that the ugly duckling, the entrepreneur being out of place. So if you are surrounded by traditionalist, right, growing up, you are the ugly duckling. You're the one who's like, couldn't we do it this way? Couldn't we try it that way? And people are like, why are you so weird? Why are you so different? And why are you so freaky, right? And then you do the thing that
Mm-hmm.
people didn't believe in, didn't understand, didn't like, or whatever at the time. And over time, then it's suddenly, oh wow, that was super cool. You did that thing, right? That's the story of a lot of entrepreneurs, right? That in the beginning, it's tricky, right? Which brings us to my other favorite analogy or comparative, and that is the little red hen. Do you know the little red hen?
Vaguely remember it. refresh me my memory, because I
Okay,
don't
yes,
remember it
thank you.
fully.
Thank you for taking the bait.
Yeah.
Well, there is the little red hen, and she has her little chicks, and she decides she would like to have some bread. And so she says to everyone, who will help me make the bread? I would like to make some bread. Who will help me plant the wheat? Right. So we start at the beginning. She's not just going in to make some bread. Who will help me plant the wheat so that I can make the bread? And not I, said the cat, not I, said the rat, not I, said the pig. And so she says, all right, well, I'll do it myself. So she plants the wheat, tends to the wheat grows. Who will help me cut the wheat so that I can make the bread? Not I, said the cat, not I, said the rat, or I'm not sure, did I say dog last time? They change them. Sometimes it's the dog, sometimes it's a rat.
I can't
Not
remember.
I, said the pig. And so she says, all right, well, I'll do it myself. So she cuts the wheat, and she does all the things to make the bread. Finally, she says, who will help me, bake? Who will help me eat the bread? Oh, I will, said the cat. Now, I will, said the rat. I will, said the pig. And she said, no, you will not. I will eat this bread with my children. You did not help me do any of the things. So now I will eat it by myself. I will celebrate my own success. Right. I really, my kids think, yeah, I don't know if they like that book or they hate that book, because I'm always like, I am the little red hen.
I like it. I like it. I like it.
But it's also, I think it's this idea of using children's it also that's the beauty of children's literature or fables, right? That they tell the story quickly, efficiently, and in a way that's playful and fun. And not if you were going to say, hey, nobody helps me, right? I mean, entrepreneurs, we're not getting help. We're frustrated. Nobody appreciates us until after we've succeeded in something. And when you tell the story, people kind of get it, and mostly are kind of like, oh yeah, oh, whoops, yeah, that's kind of right. It makes it a
Yeah.
little bit more digestible.
Yeah, I love the idea of, I love story. I love lessons and pictures with words, and all of that stuff really grooves me. It really gets me excited. And
Yeah.
you're right, as an entrepreneur, people just see the bread.
Yes, they
What
just
bread have you, what bread have you got? What bread have you made? They don't see all of
yeah,
the stuff that goes into making that bread, and actually the joy in planting the wheat, the joy in sowing the and reaping
yeah,
the harvest, and all of those parts that go unseen
yes.
in this journey. I think so. There's painting pictures with stories like that is so powerful.
Exactly.
I think
I
I
think
love it.
also as we're in the little red hen, also the concept of being able to, there that sense of accomplishment. I mean, that's actually one of the big drivers I find for entrepreneurs. It is having that agency and having that being responsible for your success. Having the control, and then putting in the work and seeing, and benefiting from the fruits of your labor, right? In this case, quite literally, right?
Well, do you know what, Laurie? That's a really important point, because we all want to eat bread. We all want to eat bread. We're all like the cat and the rat and the pig. Yeah, I'll have some bread. Yeah. Great, great, great. But actually, are we prepared to do what it takes to get the bread? And that's
That's
where I
right.
think a lot of entrepreneurship falls down, because we all want the rewards of earning money and securing our.
We want the bread.
Yeah, we want the bread, but we don't want to get up at 5 a.m. and go and put seeds into the ground, right?
No, yes,
That's the
but
bit we're not prepared to do.
I also, in terms of, it's funny because the bread I hadn't even thought about, but you don't say bread in the UK for money.
Yeah,
You don't say it. We say
yeah.
it,
We
right?
still, we wouldn't use it a lot, but yeah, it's
It's
still
like he's
understood as
making
money.
good, like he makes good bread. Like people do this for bread.
Yeah, yeah.
Bread is another word. Okay, now I think people say cheddar. I think
Oh,
that's the
right, right.
I think people talk about making that cheddar,
Making cheddar. Yeah. Dough.
getting that
Dough's a
cheddar.
word, isn't it? Yeah. Make the dough. Dough is a
Yeah,
word.
make the dough. Yeah, yeah.
Make the dough.
Yeah, that's right. You make dough, you make bread.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think you get cheddar actually.
I've not heard
It's
that one. I've not heard that one actually.
I think it's from
Cheddar.
the hip hop world, getting
Ah,
cheddar, making cheddar, you
right,
know,
right.
like, it's all about the Benjamins, baby.
The green in the US, isn't
The
it?
green,
The
yes,
green.
yes. The
All
almighty
about.
dollar. Yes, this is true. Yeah.
Uh,
Not so almighty lately, but anyway, that's a whole different discussion.
that's a summit topic for another day, right?
Yes, exactly. But oh my goodness. So we are beyond the top of the hour. We have concluded our first segment of just warming up. And now I'm wondering, do you like, let's talk a little bit of Global Entrepreneurship Week. Um, how, you know, there's 20 million people who are engaged in Global Entrepreneurship Week, it said, around the world. But often there are a lot of people who are not familiar with it. And so while it's for those who do not know, I'll tell you a little bit. It started 12 years ago, and it was under Gordon Brown,
Hmm.
former prime minister.
Yep, UK
Uh,
Prime Minister.
exactly. It was an initiative that was started under his leadership,
Yeah.
and it they wanted to test it even further. They sent it to, like, tested it out in the States the year after, and decided to go global with it. And the idea behind it, in the beginning, it was just Global Entrepreneurship Week. And I've been involved with it since the beginning, since basically, yeah, 12 years ago when I heard about it, on the very, very down low. But I started doing events connected to it. Actually, I found out about it through Stanford University. So about, yeah, 11 years ago through Stanford, then I started doing cafes and open houses. And actually, last year I was sitting at a cafe for a certain amount of hours, like with yeah, a group of colleagues. Actually, I was mentoring them at the time, and we sat there and we were open for people to come in and get a coffee and ask questions, and we were doing it by theme. Following the themes of Global Entrepreneurship Week. And over time, I also interviewed Jonathan Ortman, who is the the brains behind the whole thing, as a part of the book. And he and I spoke, I think, in 2012. And I think it was still just Global Entrepreneurship Week and Global Entrepreneur Congress, which is where they gather all of the leads of the different countries, or people who are going to be in charge of the country, activities for Global Entrepreneurship Week. And over time, it has grown to become, I mean, they're doing events all year round now. They're focusing on, they're connected with startup, like these startup weekend events that they're doing. They're doing competitions, pitch competitions. They're doing, they're connecting in a different way. So they've actually gone further into their aim to create a global ecosystem for entrepreneurship. Their focus, however, is because of the fact that it is government and institutional, or uh, organ a larger organization, that are behind it. I believe the emphasis is different. That is one of the reasons why we're sitting here today, to give another perspective, to do something that is entrepreneurial driven, for entrepreneurs, by entrepreneurs, with entrepreneurs. But what they do, and what they provide, is this great momentum for entrepreneurship, that it has created dialogue, especially in agencies and institutions and governments, to take on entrepreneurship and to investigate it, and to embrace it more, and also to discuss things like how infrastructures and policy can help to support entrepreneurship. I believe that, as an aside, it's also because of the fact that we know that in times of economic trouble, it's always the entrepreneurs that save the day, right? Through its nature, entrepreneurship, creating things, creating jobs, creating new products, creating new uses of technology, being more innovative, that gives the opportunity from a financial standpoint, since that's how people are still evaluating a country's success or failure, by their economic prowess as opposed to other things. But that's also a conversation for another time. We need to have these opportunities to connect with one another and to create systems so that all entrepreneurs are a part of the benefits. And I think that Global Entrepreneurship Week is largely for growth entrepreneurs, and it's while it is also for other entrepreneurs, it's just largely for growth entrepreneurs. And I fear that there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there who don't identify themselves as entrepreneurs because that they're not the the entrepreneurs that are marketed in the popular scheme of things. Does that is yes? That was pretty much that.
Mm. I think the important thing in all of this is about, because it's about support, isn't it? It's about having that network of people that you can ask questions to. And I know in the UK there was an organisation called Business Link, and
Mhm.
when I had my e-commerce business back in the day before it went bust, but that's another story. When I had my e-commerce business, Business Link was invaluable because I had a question about this. I had something I didn't understand and I needed help with. It was almost like a lifeline
Yes.
for me as a business owner
Hmm.
when I needed it, and things like that with the way that the economies have gone around the world, and in the Western world certainly spending on things like that has just diminished. And so as a business owner, you just feel like left floating in the breeze, completely adrift with no, mixing my metaphors there, aren't I? Floating in the breeze and feeling adrift at sea.
Yeah.
That's wrong, isn't it?
You can be.
Um,
Can't you be adrift? Can't you
can
be
you be
adrift in
adrift?
the air?
Can you? Yeah. Oh,
You
thank
can
you,
be.
Laurie.
You can
Thank
be
you
adrift
very
in
much.
the
Yeah, you can. You can. You can. So, but anyway, there is this sense, isn't there, as of being adrift and not having,
air.
well, how do I do this and what's that, and so many questions and stuff, which is
Mm.
what makes the road you walk as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, so difficult. And so the idea of having support and people that can hold your hand and guide you up the mountain or over that hill or through
Yes.
that river, whatever that is for you,
Mm.
that's so critical, isn't it? And I think that was the drive for Global Entrepreneurship Week. Let's face it, let's be real. The idea is that it boosts the economy because more people making businesses pay more tax, boosts the coffers of the state, right? So
Mm.
it drives economy.
Smart.
It's the engine of the nation, right?
Right.
Whichever nation is yours, right? So, and then when you drive the nation, you're able to give back, to help, to support, and all of those cool things. So
Yeah.
it is. I think it can be a catalyst
Yes.
for economic growth. But when you're in the thick of it, you don't see any of that. You just see the stuff that's going on in your world. Remember the glasses from earlier?
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
just seeing what we see, aren't we? And we see the world from our perspective, and you can feel lost at sea or
Yes.
adrift.
Yes.
So I love the idea of having that
Yeah.
support that's there and available for you to
Exactly.
get it when you need it.
I think also the other thing is, like, in thinking about it, sometimes the support is just in the cheerleading, right? It's just that when you're losing your ground, that you're losing your footing, that there's just someone who can just somebody to lean on a little bit. But
Oh,
also
yeah.
when you're like going, sometimes it's just when I've had clients where I've said, you might not believe it, but I believe it. I have enough belief in you and what you can do, what I can see. Like, I see you succeeding. I see you able to do this. And I'm really not blowing smoke, as they say. I see it. I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it. And sometimes that's enough to push them so that they can, get some traction. And
Mm,
then they can, like when you lose your confidence, it's hard to get through the difficult times. But if somebody can kind of loan you some while you're there, that gets you over the hump and can help you to move forward. So I think, support really in the truest sense of support, which is broad, and that support can be lending a hand. It can be giving a kind word. It can be acknowledging somebody so that they see, hey, I'm there, I'm visible, this means something. It can be giving the tools, providing the tools so that they can move forward. It can be giving them resources, learning resources, and it can be advice, and it can be, one-on-one coaching or group coaching, or whatever is necessary to support them in the broadest sense to to succeed in the way they want to succeed. Basically, back to your own mission in your own business, and my mission in my business, right? Um, we're we're there to help others achieve their dreams,
mm.
right?
Yep. And the interesting thing about something you said there is, I remember reading somewhere, I can't remember where I read it, but it was saying about you can't change the fact, but you can change the label that you attach to that fact. So we have a circumstance and an event or something that happens in our life and our business,
Hmm.
whether good or bad. It is neither good or bad. It is the thing. It's a fact.
Exactly. Yes.
What we can change is the label that we attach to that thing that happens. So we can take a negative thing. My business went bust. I lost everything I had in the world, except the relationships around, the core relationships around me. I lost everything else
Yeah.
from what's the word? Like a things kind of, what do they call it? Belongings type of
Oh,
perspective.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
lost everything I had in the world, and that's an event that happened that I can't change. But what you can change is the way that you see and label that event. And the
Yeah.
same is true with this. You mentioned about saying, "Hey, you are good enough. You can do this. You can. Why don't you tackle this problem from that angle and look at things this way?" And
Hmm.
what that's doing is it's actually allowing the person to change the label that they attach to that event. It's
Mm.
allowing them to say, "Hey, this failure is an opportunity
Yeah.
rather than a failure. It's a positive rather than a negative. That
Hmm.
negative of me losing my business turned out to be the best thing that happened in my career, because that was the catalyst to me now enjoying the life and
Benefits. Yeah.
and work of my dreams. Right, I pinch myself every day that I get to help wonderful doing something that I feel compelled and driven to do. It's like that's what I see as living the dream, is springing out of bed every morning. Well, most mornings, not every morning, that would be a
Yeah.
lie. But springing out of bed to do the thing that really lights you up inside. That's what they mean by living your passion. That's what they mean by being authentic and congruent with who you are as a human being. We're all
Mm.
on the path to finding what that thing is for us. And so this idea of having guides and support and mentors and help along that way is
Mm.
so important, isn't it? It's so important. That's why I think the work that happens throughout Global Entrepreneurship Week and all across the
Yeah.
world, 52 weeks of the year, by people who are uh, awake, people who are conscious, aware of the journey that we're all on, and
Mm.
look to help others on that same journey.
Yeah.
Some exciting things going on all the time. It's
Yeah.
exhilarating, isn't it?
It is. It's
Mhm.
it's it's exhilarating, and I could imagine also somewhat overwhelming at times. And so there's, to me, again, back to the Entrepreneur Hotline itself, that the vision of this to be something that offers a, a more formalized version of it, a more organized, you know, version where there is a rotation of certain key elements that we find over, we'll discover over the week what are the most key important things for people. But the idea that a clearinghouse of sorts for opportunities, I think, is also something that the entrepreneurs can use. I find myself, and also I've coached clients where I've thought, wow, why didn't you apply for this this I saw that there was this offering. Like, I live in Denmark, which is a social welfare state, which means that there is a lot of money to be had, through the government, through the amount of taxes that we pay here. It's used for a lot of very good uses, for lot of good opportunities for the constituency, for the citizens,
For the people, yeah.
for the people. And one of within the arts and with within entrepreneurship, they're been focusing on, and it's kind of like, it's tricky because on the one hand there's a lot of assistance and a lot of help, and on the other hand it's like, well, but is it the right kind of help and assistance? And I think that's why getting in the room together, or having, like you said, like Global Entrepreneurship Week, having people from different layers of the area, whether it's academics, or whether it's corporates, or whether it's government, or whether it's large startup growth companies, or whether it's, Susie the hairdresser with, two chairs in her shop, maybe one chair even. It needs to have the whole gamut, if we are in fact interested in supporting the whole of the entrepreneurial spirit. We can't do it all at once. Clearly, there must be some focus, but I think it's like I like to talk about symphony. We have You and I have had conversations about focus, and focus is, anybody who's ever met me will want to have a conversation with me about focus, and I will fight tooth and nail. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's not a good thing. So I am aware there's a lot with focusing, but I think my restraint, or my defense against, or my need to fight, not to fight being focused, but to fight that there's a default that exists about that a lot of people use focus. And to me, it's sometimes close to my all-time favorite hair on the back of my neck word: realistic. Oh my goodness, please do not say realistic to me. Realistic, like focus, often, or too often in my experience, has been used as a manipulator. Now, I'm not against being realistic when it's realistic, realistic in practical terms, much like you talk about facts versus interpretation of events. Realistic is contextual. And so, therefore, when people are throwing at, like when a society says, let's be realistic, or when people often, I've had people say, but Lori, maybe you need to be realistic about something. And when the people say be realistic, they're of course using their context. And what's realistic for them might not be realistic for me. And what's realistic for me might not be realistic for them. And so it's a it's difficult because it's very contrary to how most people think about it. But I feel like it's really important because my whole life I have been told about things that I can't do. or you're too short to high jump, you're too this to do that. And that's I use the high jump analogy because when you think about it, when you think about sports in general, it is the ultimate. If you're a sports person, you understand realistic moves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that jump, the bar gets raised, right? You and in ultimate sports, right? If like with the Olympics, with world records, you know, I remember when you couldn't even run a 5-minute mile, right? I think you're right. Or it's, people break records and then everybody breaks it, right? And suddenly that's, so someone would say it's not realistic. Like nobody has ever done it. We can't send a man to the moon. It's not realistic. Now we send women to the moon, right? And now we're planning to send lots of people to go and visit the moon. So I mean, it's not realistic yet, right? So sometimes it's not realistic, right? And I hope this is making sense. I feel like I'm not as succinct as I should be about this, but there's lots of layers to it. But what my point is, if I say to you, I don't know if it's realistic, or you and I are in a group and we're working on something and we're looking at the deadlines and we have the facts, and you say, I don't think it's realistic for me. I don't think it's realistic for us to achieve this because of this. But if you are looking at somebody else's business, somebody's aspiration, somebody's, you know, idea, vision, all these things, and you're saying it's not realistic, I would invite you to check yourself and see if you're saying that as a default. Like when you're saying it to them, is it because you don't because it's never been done, or because you don't feel like you could do it, right? Or if you're assuming, or if you're pigeonholing someone and deciding, I don't think you can do it. Because do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If the idea is supporting, I mean, most people are going to be that way. That is by default, because we as a society are trained to look in those terms. But if you're aiming to support somebody in a difficult situation, right? It's like someone who is suffering from an illness, and and not giving them hope, right? It's you sometimes hope is the only thing that you need. Hope will, because the will overcome amazing things, right? And so I think that's that's something I would also like people to consider. You don't want to it you can't, this is just a crazy example, you can't make a 5-year-old a 10-year-old. That's not realistic. Okay, fair enough. But you can't say that a 5-year-old, you would assume most 5-year-olds can't do certain things, right? But then you have an exceptional 5-year-old. And if you're unwilling to accept that that person could be exceptional, then you limit them and you teach them not to trust that they're exceptional, and they won't attempt to achieve exceptional things. And when I say exceptional, I don't mean that it doesn't have to be groundbreaking, like, discovering some new magical thing, like making people go to the moon, but it can be also smaller things. But I think that that's where it starts, in childhood, in the possibility. I would like people to consider possibilities, and and how to enable people more than they're so busy trying to protect people, like, because most people who use it in term, hey, Colin, I say this with, with love, because I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want to see you fail, Colin. But what they don't realize, or what I might not realize, is by putting that out that there for you, because inside of many entrepreneurs, there is a level of, can I do this? There is a level, right? And when you're trying to do something, like, basically, the harder it is, the more difficult, the more out there it is, the more energy you need to muscle up and momentum. And so when you are on a trajectory where people are saying, you can do it, you got this, like when you're at the marathon, people are running and they're like, go, go, and you're like thinking, I can't run anymore, I can't run, I've hit the wall, go, you can do it, you can do it. Back to what I said earlier, then people can do it. But if you're running and you're, like, okay, I decided to do this marathon, I'm doing it, I'm running, and people are on the sideline, oh, you look tired, I don't think you're going to make it. Then you start to take that in, and that poisons you, right? You're like, that was a really long tirade on realistic. Actually, it started on focus and then it went to realistic.
Yeah, but
okay.
Do you know, I think the sense of realism and limits and all of those things is so valid, Laurie, because it links to the sense of collaboration and support that we're talking about in Global Entrepreneurship Week, because it goes both ways. Yes, you have people that sense check things that you're doing and go, hey, but maybe have you thought of looking at a problem this way, or have you thought about that? It also goes the opposite way. And you can be thinking, hey, this is the thing I need to be doing. This is where I need to be playing. This is what I need to be working on. And it can be a case of, man, why is your goal here when you should be aiming for the stars with what you do? Why aren't and I think that's when we support and help and mentor and coach people, it's our responsibility to take them out of themselves,
to be great.
Make them become, help them to reach for the stars, or send men and women to the moon, whatever that thing is, help to elevate them in whatever it is that they're doing. And so for me, the whole idea of being realistic is actually not a, be realistic, let's push you down, let's quell that creative part of your being. And it should be something that lifts those limits. Let's be more unrealistic in the way that we approach it.
Yeah.
So
I think your aim wants to be, actually, if people were more unrealistic, we would have more success in the world, because people would dare to do things that they don't dare to do.
Yeah, and don't you think a lot of it is the way that we label as a society, the way that we label failure? Oh, don't you said it before, Laurie. Oh, don't do that. You were mimicking the voice of the two people sat on your shoulder, right?
Yes.
And you're going, oh, don't do that because you'll fail.
Yeah.
And we are all conditioned, aren't we, at a very early age? And education, man, we could talk about education of our young people till the cows come home, right? We're all conditioned to believe that failing is bad.
Yeah.
Failing is wrong, and that comes down to that label again. If you fail, it's wrong. So therefore, what we end up with is a lot of people afraid to even try.
Yes. And if you don't try,
that is criminal, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, if you don't try, you have actually the only failure is not to try.
Oh, I love that. I love that. The only failure is not to try. How many people have a burning desire to do something amazing, to do something different, to do something that will change people's lives? You've got this thing in you that you wish and dream about doing, but we do nothing. We're left just kind of, with nothing more than that idea. And if you think about the energy behind that, the idea, that thing that is burning inside of you to do, that's unlocking creativity. That's unlocking an energy that can make a real difference to the world that we all live in, and we all benefit from that. So for me, entrepreneurship is about really harnessing and nurturing this.
Yes.
Right. It's linked to that, allowing people the freedom to be able to do that, to be able to harness and play with that creative energy that changes lives and changes the world that we live in. Yes. So let's create some more unrealistic energy around entrepreneurship, so that people can dream big, play bigger, and do some amazing things. That's what this is all about. That's what you and I are here for today. That's what all of the other people involved in this event, that we're running, in the events that they're running all around the globe. That's
Yeah.
what it's all about. It's about allowing you to tune into that frequency of that creative energy and do some amazing things in the world. The world deserves to hear what you've got to say.
Absolutely. And I think if you think about it, uh, in experiences I've had in the innovative space, and people want to talk, big companies, big universities, big government, governments talking about wanting to be innovative. And almost as soon as they say they want to be innovative, they want innovative coaching or training, or they want to explore innovative solutions, then they talk about realistic. What's realistic? What can we realistically do to innovate? Well, actually, you can't, because if you think realistic, you can't innovate. They don't work together. You can't be realistic and innovate, right? Because innovation goes beyond what reality. I mean, because realistic is about what's in the current reality, which is status quo. And the challenge is that if you want to have status quo, then you can't move beyond the status quo, because it's where things are complacent and safe. You have to get uncomfortable with the uncomfortable. I didn't say that. Well, I just said it, but it's not my original. I can't
Yeah,
remember who
I
said
love
it,
I
but
love that
yeah,
saying. I love that saying.
you do have to get uncomfortable with the uncomfortable. And I mean, you have to get comfortable with the
Comfortable with the
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable.
Of course,
Yeah, yeah.
yes. You have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And while, of course, there are certain, there's a certain framework. So if we're talking about, uh, if you want to talk about, is it realistic for us to discuss innovation in 1 day or 2 days or a week or whatever, then you're talking about something where I can get on board with you in terms of realistic, because there are only so many hours in the day. There's so many, people are working jobs and they're hired to come at certain times. We can talk about that in a realistic sense. But in starting to work in the innovative process, you you will limit your ability to be innovative, directly correlated to your need to be realistic. It's one of the biggest challenges, and why so many companies start like innovative branches that don't succeed, because they they want to control the innovation. And while there's also actually, his name, what's his name? I actually interviewed him. I can't think of his name right now. Uh, Predictive Innovation is the name of his book. Mark Profit. And he used to work for Apple. And his book on predictive innovation is, he has certain criteria that you can work through to actually predict innovative outcomes, which is amazing. He is he's actually very, very brilliant, really very heady, a lot of it, like big brain. uh, so it's easier to have him say the stuff while he's talking and interpret, than it is for me right now. It's been some years since actually, years ago, I also interviewed him about this specific topic, and we worked through, like, we made it's recorded somewhere out in the ether, uh about, like, saving the planet, or something really huge. And he was like, oh, we can do that. We have let's go through, let's work it out, right? And that's, to me, that's so amazing that you can. And the ideas were really good, right? And I think that, to be able to, because, speaking of saving the planet and things, the current state of the world, whether it's environmental or social or cultural, all these the world is in tremendous transition, because so much is happening, and so much has been happening, a lot of it connected to the way we have been living in the world, that we didn't realize that we were actually not owners of the world. just a piece of the world, a part of the world. Um, we did some things that now are coming to haunt us, but we also have all of this new technology, which has changed the way we live our lives. Which is I'm gonna segue into something else now, and that is this back to this entrepreneurial spirit talk, and that is my belief. It's based on Marshall McLuhan. Yes, are you familiar with the Canadian communication theorist Marshall McLuhan?
No,
He wrote a book called
enlighten me.
The Medium is the Message, and he's back. I mean, he was talking about television, and he was saying that by the existence of television, like, so in when new technologies come about, it changes the way how humans behave, how humans are. And by watching television, by even like watching, it's not like people used to have a discussion about, well, if you watch shows where people are getting shot, or you watch romantic comedies, like, so the nature of the show, does that influence your psyche or your brain, or your human being? And he said, actually, it just by its nature, it doesn't matter what you're watching, it does something to us as humans, it changes us. And he said, like, the light bulb, which I thought, like, he said the medium is the message, that's where the communication is taking place. And the light bulb I was fascinated by that, because you think of a light bulb, you don't think of it as a medium in terms of other, like when you think of radio or TV or newspapers, you don't think of the light bulb as a medium. But the light bulb changed everything, just like writing changed everything. The light bulb allowed us to work at night, right? The light bulb allowed us to work async, not be dependent upon the natural cyclical rhythms of the sun, and it allowed us other opportunities that changed the way we live our lives, right? And so that brings us to the internet, obviously, and everything that happened with the internet, and everything that's happened with mobile, especially mobile, right? So the idea of, just not check, like, you talked about going offline for half an hour. Some of your clients might struggle with that, because people have gotten so attached to it, right? I've extricated myself from my dependency. I still, like, I'm a super user. I started doing web design in the 90s, and have been going full throttle on the internet, and using tech since, and to a fault where it was starting to make me sick. So it's something to be real. It's the struggle is real. I was working at night and working on the computer, and I wasn't getting enough vitamin D, and I was just obsessed, and always, like, the being on call, that feeling, uh it's like being a fireman, or like being a new mother, or being, a police, like, that you can always be called up, right? This That wasn't the way that we were kind of wired, if we didn't work on those fields, or if we weren't in that position, or a new father also, now that anybody, the baby can wake everybody up in the middle of the night. And it's that, that feeling of being on call, right? And that's critical, because this this is what has increased our stress levels, because you don't get to take a break. You don't feel like you can take a break. And before, when you work for, in a traditional sense, when when time was off, you didn't even think about work. Like, you were expected not to think about work. And that's the other thing, is that people who were working jobs before, the game for them has also changed. And before, one would have said, oh, well, it's more, people say that being an entrepreneur is risky. And over time you can look at it and think, well, is it actually more risky than working for somebody, helping them to build a business, helping them to earn money, helping them to build equity, reputation, and doing all of these things, and having no guarantee that you can have a job, or having no guarantee that you have the influence, like that you have influence over your day, your work, your output, what happens with your output. All of these things actually start to become more of a challenge for people, and that's why they are saying, I left that job because I not because I wanted to work less, but because I wanted to work with more meaning, because I wanted to work with more authority, with more agency, because I wanted to work and have control over what my life looked like.
I think there's that whole idea of work. So something funny actually. My wife works in a school, and one of the other teachers was talking to her and saying that her daughter said to her, "Mummy, why do we say hang up the phone?" And if you think about that, because we don't hang up the phone. Back in the day when the phone would be on the
Yes.
wall, right, and
Yeah, exactly.
you'd hang the receiver onto the
Yeah.
thing to disconnect the line, right? And
Right.
I mean, in my day, it was more, it was one of those ones with the circle where you put your finger in and you
Yeah.
twist it around, and then it will go nee,
And then it goes all the way back.
and
Took forever to call
that was just
somebody.
one number, right? So you have
Yeah.
to put every number in like that, and then
Yeah.
you'd hang the receiver because it was attached with a wire. You'd hang it on, and
Yeah.
kids these days they made me laugh because they don't even know where or what that means, where that came from.
No, that's true.
I remember my son being like fascinated by the fact that the word car, we all know what a car is, right? But it was a derivative of the word horseless carriage, because carriages were the
Yeah.
way that everybody would travel, a cart and a
Right.
carriage and with a pulled by a
Horse and
horse, right?
carriage. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's
Oh,
where we get
nice.
the word car from. But if you don't understand the context of things, then it's very difficult uh, to appreciate like we just say and do these things without even
Yeah.
realizing, don't we? And
Yes.
so a lot has happened in the last 20 years alone. It's like the world has just changed so much. It's the path of innovation and change in how we do everything, how we shop, how we
Mhm.
meet and connect, and all of these things has changed so much. Is it the case now where you get educated in school, get an education and get into a job and work and then retire? That old model of
Yeah.
life, that I just don't know that that's entirely relevant anymore. Is that
I think it
realistic? Is that realistic,
I
Laurie?
don't think it's
To coin
realistic.
your phrase,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I
Is it
don't think it's
realistic?
realistic.
Listen, you mentioned something really cool, which was about the idea of being an entrepreneur as being risky.
Yeah.
Well, I would challenge that, and I would say, actually, it's more risky to try and navigate the world in the old way, to try
Yes.
and navigate the world by saying, "Hey, I'm going to I'm going to get an education, I'm going to
Mhm.
get a good job, and I'm going to be in that job and work my hardest and do X and do Y and do Z, and then I'm going to retire." That's
Yeah.
just that's
Mhm.
to me is unrealistic and more
Yeah.
risky
Yes.
than
Exactly.
making
And
forging our own path.
and I think that, I mean, personally, I felt that way a lot, like for a long period of time, but I think that it's becoming more apparent to more people now because of course the message is getting spread more, and also the companies that people are working for are becoming less dependable. All People who worked, there used to be quite a, there were companies where you could also count on that they had your back. You could also count on that they were going to exist. I mean, there was a movie years ago, and that the joke was, like the guy, he wanted to be an actor, and he, was struggling, and his grandmother used to say to him, she was kind of thinking it was unrealistic for him to make it in in that field. So she was like, well, it doesn't matter. There's always work at the post office. Well, the thing is, acting still goes on, but is there work at the post office?
Mhm. Mhm.
The post office isn't what the post office used to be. Like there were certain jobs that if you just got in, you were set for life.
Yeah, job for
And
life. That's what they'd
yeah,
say, wasn't it? Job for
yeah,
life, right? So
you
if you
were
get in
set
there,
up.
you're set. You're set. You can be there for life. You work your way up the ladder and all of that stuff. But
But this,
does that really exist now?
I don't know that it exists, and if it does exist, who wants that? I mean, like the millennials or the next group, they're not wired in that way. Like that brings us back to the whole McLuhan thing, like our attention spans, right? I mean, literally, you're on the phone, and people want to, like are texting and multitasking, and you think they're gonna want to stay in one job. I mean, even from a relationship standpoint, sorry, got to say it. People are talking like these new forms of relationships that people are starting to say, like, it made sense that people were married for 60, 70, 80 years back in the day. I don't know that that's going to be the case with this next generation, because people are like realizing themselves in different parts, and the changes. So the idea of, and okay, you are, married, and God bless you, and great, and I hope you're married forever. um I am not so successful in that area, so I don't want anybody to like say, oh, you're just saying that. uh I'm saying that as an idea that people are starting to struggle with it more, and it's because of conventions. And I think this the reason I'm talking about relations, like, why I thought we were talking about entrepreneurship. It's really actually critical for two reasons. Is that, to me, that relationship, in the same way, you need to nurture a relationship, you need to grow in the same direction. Otherwise, you don't. The reason some people were together for as long as they were together in the old day, I mean, it used to make sense from a practical standpoint. So, you had the farmer, he had the little woman, she was doing all the, like, I'm this, well, feminist, please don't get mad at me. It's just an example. Um,
You're on dangerous ground now,
I'm
Laurie.
on
Be
very
careful.
dangerous
Be
ground.
careful.
Yes, but if we don't put it, it doesn't have to be even that much of a like binary. It could be, it's like you say about collaboration, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the farmer with the little woman, or the husband with the. It could be, I don't care. It could be whomever. It's two partners working together. It makes sense that there's a reason, like, to have two. Two heads are better than one. It makes sense. For also with children, you have two perspectives. It's in an ideal world, you have two compatible partners, who have two healthy, good perspectives to share. It's often not the case. There's a lot of turmoil and trauma, but it is a good thing when it works. But I think making that an expectation, we've gone away from it, even because, I mean, the stigma, there used to be stigma attached, like you didn't get divorced at one point. That was a bad stigma. Or to have children out of wedlock. I mean, most people, I do live in a forward thinking country, so that I'm biased with that. I know this isn't the case for different cultures. Out of all, I'm trying to respect your cultures. I'm not familiar with your cultures. I'm more familiar with this experience that I have here, especially in Denmark. And many people, have the horse is in front of the carriage. You have the kids, you live together, and then you're deciding after some years to get married, which is the reverse of when I grew up, right? That you got married, you got to know each other, you dated for X amount of years, you got married, you had kids, you stayed in the jobs. Everything was more the same, right? It was more built for status quo. It was more based on that industrial revolution. Well, when people are finding their meaning, it takes some time to do that, right? And for many of our generation, I think the challenge is that people are starting to say, you know what, okay, I've been beating to the drum of somebody else for so long. And now I hear there's an opportunity for me to beat to my own drum. And so people are going out to do that. And that's causing havoc in a relationship standpoint. And from an entrepreneurial standpoint, the challenge is that you need support, right? And entrepreneurship is hard on relationships. If you're not in sync with your partner, which is great when you are, but I think even when you have a good relationship, it's still a challenge. You can't make somebody see what they don't see. And so while you can have a partner who has the best intentions for you, if they don't see the vision, if they don't see what, like, if they're wired, especially 9 to 5 wired and more traditional, and you're over here, basically, they're living with the enemy, that you are constantly, they are constantly confronted, and you're constantly confronted with the opposite, right? It's like, yeah, but if it's not working out, I think maybe you should consider going and getting a real job.
Be realistic.
Be realistic, get a real job. I mean, and that is a broad, the society as a whole is not very educated or understanding or supportive of the entrepreneurial experience if they're saying get a real job, because entrepreneurship is a real job. I mean, it's not a job, like maybe the word job is the tricky part, but that's the challenge, and that's back to how do you keep the motivation going? How do you keep working if you're, when you use that kind, when you're using energy to convince, when you're using energy to defend, when you're using energy to deflect. That's my phrase is management through distraction. That's part of it. And the things that we do that distract us from the core work that we need to do.
I think the idea of every one of us, every human being wants to be comforted. We want to feel certain, and we want to have security and safety. It's a
Mhm.
fundamental base human need, right? So if you breathe in and you breathe out, you want those things. You
Yes.
want certainty and surety. That's a universal fact. And so, in the absence of finding that in a job or a relationship or in places, the places where we would traditionally find that, especially with work,
Mhm.
the way that we view work, I seek that certainty and comfort in the uncertainty of entrepreneurship. I find it in that. I find that being in control of my own choices and my own actions are the thing that give me comfort, that give me
Mm.
security and certainty. That's kind of the first piece, the way that I see it. And then the other part of that is for you, what you talked about defending and staying motivated and all of those things. And I really do believe that that comes back to what we talked about a while ago around the reflectiveness and being consciously aware of who you are as a human being, and being sure and certain at your
Mhm.
core for the
Mhm.
very reason that you're on this planet. What is that? And that might be to be in a job. That might be, that
Yeah.
I'm not. It's not all. It takes all different. What do they say? Different strokes for different folks, right?
Yes.
It takes lots and lots of different moving parts to make an engine. And
Mhm.
so the engine of society exists because there are people that are fulfilled and love to do different things. The fact that we're diverse and different is so vital to making us who we are as a civilization, right? And
Yes.
so, but what that means for you as an individual, as a person, what is that thing for you? What is that? What is that drive, that motivation, that thing at your core that that lights you up, that you feel called to be, to be, and to do? And that I think is connecting with that is such a critical part of every one of our journey, whatever that looks like for us. And that I think if we're present and that reflective work is being done, then the circumstances of who and what you are they change anyway. Who you are today isn't who you'll be in a year's time or even 6 months time. Everything is impermanent. That's the nature of our existence. But if you can get surety and certainty at the core, that change doesn't affect. It no longer becomes a, hey, why don't you do this? Hey, you need to be doing that. None of that
Mhm.
affects you because you've got um, what's called resilience
Mm.
to for the stuff, the flaming arrows of life. Let's face it, they hit us every single day, but
Yes.
because you're resilient, they bounce away and they don't impact and change who you are at your core. So that's where that this idea of the mindfulness and reflective and
Yeah.
understanding why you do what you do is so critical, because that becomes your anchor, doesn't it? Your rock in
Absolutely.
the storm that is this journey, man. This
Yeah.
exciting, thrilling,
Exactly.
scary, beautiful, wonderful thing that we all get to experience for as long as we breathe in and out, right?
Yeah. Like it's true. It really
Mm.
is true. It is a. It's. I mean, it's not. We're kind of in the more philosophical aspects of it, but I think really it is down to basically 101. Entrepreneur 101 should begin with you. Should begin with getting yourself in order. Like there should be when you're there's a lot of things that people kind of look at when they're in the startup environment in teams and putting people together and skills and they're focused on match and things like that. But ultimately, if you want to create a team, if you want to or in yourself, you need to first 101 know you need to know yourself, and you need to know who you want to become. And so I think before yeah, back in the day, you would have gone to a bank. You want to start a business, a classic would be you want to start a business. You need to make your business plan. It's several pages long, if not a dissertation. You send that to the bank manager who looks at it. And for years, I mean, for decades, that was okay. That made sense. People thought that was acceptable. But now, I mean, even then, I think it was fiction at best. I mean, it was, this is how I'd like it to look. I mean, you couldn't, I mean, at this point, it's just kind of a joke. Like if you're predicting 5 years in advance what your business is going to do, I think that brings up the favorite word that we want to use. That's not realistic.
Be realistic, Laurie. Be
Yes,
realistic.
that in truth, because no one can know, like you can. I think we need, it's also language is important, and we have been playing with the words and picking up on different things or talking about literature and things. But I think my big I don't know, hurrah hurrah or sign, like doing marches in the streets, is we need to understand the entrepreneurial spirit better. We need to understand human dynamics better. We need to put some things in place. We need to use words better. And I think it's that starting this, to go from this is what a business is going to look like, and thinking about the business specifically, looking at the people. Because what I found is people start businesses in a way. It's to Now I'm going to go with my analogy of motherhood or parenthood in general. I think we talked about this. Did we talk about this before? Not today, but and another time. I love this analogy of the entrepreneur and the baby and the conception and all these things. I won't go into the full on analogy, but I will say that when you are doing this, when you are creating this thing, when you want to engage in this thing called entrepreneurship and evolve, it is much like when you have a baby. you know, most, and this is perfect circumstances, this is ideal circumstances. You meet someone, you fall in love, you want to have a baby, you decide, you plan it, you decide to have a baby. Boom. You are excited, you love that baby. Before you see that baby comes out, that baby is great, doing fine. But then maybe that baby has colic, and then the baby kind of messes with you a little bit and keeping you up at night and making you a little crazy. And it's not the baby's fault, it's just what it is. And the baby gets better and the baby feels better. The baby lives a wonderful life, but it's a baby. So it becomes a toddler, a teenager, you know. Things happen, and you can't expect to treat a teenager the same way you treat a toddler. You can't expect that the way you feel about your life is going to be the same when you were that toddler's mother or father. And it's the same thing with entrepreneurship. And I think people forget, if you start, I've seen people, they start a business in their 20s or 30s, and they have a lot of bravado and they're thinking about a lot of stuff and they haven't had kids yet, or yes, in the case where they decide to have kids and then they have the kids, and that changes their whole, like, if you watch, I mean, this is the beauty of having done this research over a decade, is you see, especially like some of the gurus, what they were selling 10 years ago is often different, has morphed over time, not because they were being insincere, but because they're also at different places in their life. And I feel that some of the things that you want, even some of the accolades that you really would have felt were important when you were younger in your own business, like your earlier business, and what you want now, they're different because you've learned things, because you've aged, because you've experienced things. And I think if you're starting a business, like, in terms of back to this whole kind of starting off in society and doing a check-in, if you're starting a business, much, I think there's a lot also to be learned from the work environment. I mean, the workplace environment in a corporation, that when you're starting a business, that you think about things like, okay, where am I in my life? Like, do I have a partner? Am I looking for a partner? Am I looking to have children? Am I about to be an empty nester? I know there's like a lot of things in between that, but we just jumped right to some of these things. And how that can potentially affect your ability. Yeah, I mean, that it's going to affect your perspective on what you're doing, but also your ability to act in what you're doing. When you have a small child, you're going to most likely be more tired, more challenged, because you have no control over how that situation is unfolding, right? Because you can't control the baby. And so if you have a business and you have a baby at the same time, they're both unknown situations. So you might be more stressed, more likely to be stressed. You might be more sleep deprived than you would if you were doing the same venture as a school child, or if you did the same venture as a side hustle where you were working a job, or if you did the same hustle later when you were retired. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Does that
absolutely. It's all about perspective as well, isn't it? That perspective's so important. And I think the critical thing in all of this, I say critical a lot. I've realized that today. I've said it quite a bit.
I say
It's so
perspective and
critical.
realistic. Yeah.
It's so critical. It's so
Yes.
critical. Um,
Paramount.
it-
It's
it's
paramount.
paramount. I like that word. I'll use that one instead for a time. But what is paramount is this idea that it's okay. You're not alone. There is support. There's people that have walked that path. There's people that have raised kids before that can show
Mhm.
you and help you, at times of need and at times of joy and success and celebration as well, equally. But you've got to be reassured by that fact that you're not
Yes.
alone, and look for that help. Not just, I'm talking about this forum now, but that help is always out
Yes.
there, as
Yeah.
and when you need it, isn't it?
And that help doesn't have to be an expert. That help I really think that people underestimate the ear or the body, the person who just, sometimes just even through social, right? Just getting that, like, getting, respecting that people are putting information out in the world, and are doing it in a vacuum. That it's good to have the feedback. Sometimes it's nice, you have spent time creating a blog post, or have designed something, and it's nice to have people, let you know that I saw it, I appreciated it. It was good. That was good. That helps you to keep going, because if you think you're doing things and nothing's happening, then it's hard to keep the momentum, right? And I
You
think
know,
that a lot of people get nervous about it.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, because
Okay.
I think if you have that drive and that if you've done that deep work to understand why you're driven to do what it is that you do, then you don't you're not impacted by the like or the
Yes.
validation. You don't need the validation. Do you know what I mean? I understand what you're saying about
Yeah.
it's good to get like feedback and know that there's connections and people there that have got your best interests, but that to me is secondary, Laurie.
Yeah.
That comes as a result of doing the thing that you're on this earth to do, of doing your best work, and
Well,
then that
oh,
you know.
okay. Yeah, it's not that I disagree with you. It's that it was a different perspective, and the perspective was why we do it, but why we get promoted to do it. I mean,
Mm,
like, if you think of, now, you are the anti-business marketing coach. The You have a different perspective, but if in all of the teachings that you have also seen, I know that you also are good at taking in programs and looking and seeing what's out there. And the popular, this idea, you want to test your market. I mean, so this is what I mean, is there's a certain element of you knowing when you're doing what you're doing because you basically have to do it. It's a part of you, and it's what you want to express, in the same way that a artist produces artwork, to work through their own whatever, or that they have, it's coming from within, right? As opposed to a designer, who typically it comes from outside. It's your focus is more on what will the market bear, not what do I want to put it out, like, what do I want to put out there. There are elements, of course, with both, but that's what I was speaking to, the latter. So I was
mm,
speaking, when you put your stuff out there and you're testing the market. Is this something that people want? If you don't get a response, then you're doing it for yourself. At least at this point, at this juncture, it doesn't mean that people won't catch up, or there. It could be many things. Like, you have to look at it, right? But it was more in that vein of
mm, mm.
getting that feed. It's the feedback loop
Yes,
that
I understand.
to
So you're designing and making something that is valid in that sense. Yeah.
for
I think
people. Yeah.
there's a distinction between kind of researching and developing products that are designed to solve people's needs
Yes.
and the whole like I, me, mine element of what you do, because it's when you're a solo entrepreneur especially, it's difficult to detach you from the stuff that you put out into the world. So if somebody
Hmm.
says, hey, that's a load of rubbish, we feel diminished inside as a
Yes.
person. And I
Hmm.
think that's the kind of distinction I was setting at, is that we don't want
No.
we don't want to be restricted in how freely we give our gift to the world
Hmm.
by the negative and the positive comments and feedback that we get
Yes.
on social media and places like that, because in reality that doesn't change or alter who we are at our core and the reason that we do what we do.
Yes.
On the contrary,
Hmm.
those things are just things. the
Yes.
the the most important thing, the paramount thing, there we go, look, I didn't say
Yes.
critical.
Paramount. Yes.
Hey, thank you for that. Is
Yeah.
that we're driven to do that important work that we feel we're here to do. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's it's interesting when you look at developing. So if we look at like creating a product or something that somebody needs, a solution, then dipping into the market in that sense with your ear to the ground to hear what people are saying,
Mm,
and creating minimum viable versions of ideas to
yes.
test markets and stuff like that, then it's critical. But equally so there, you still, you have to have almost an emotional detachment, don't
Yes.
you? Otherwise you can end up being mortally wounded when somebody says that's rubbish,
Yes.
because you go,
I
oh, you associate that's rubbish with, because your ego
Yeah.
is
It's
baked into
attached.
whatever it is, isn't it? And you, so that then becomes them saying to you personally, you're rubbish, and then you
You
start to think I'm rubbish. So you diminish and you do less work. You don't do it. You don't do this. You don't do amazing things in the world because you feel diminished. And that, I think, is that's the negativity. Perhaps we should talk about this at some point. But that's
Yeah.
the negativity around the world that we live in, because it is 24/7. Because it's all, there's a lot
Yes.
of mask wearing. There's a lot of fakery out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of putting our best selves out in the world, especially in social media, right?
Mm.
Um, that
Can I
causes
just
problems in
hold?
itself.
I definitely want to talk about that, but I wanted to just jump on what you said because it was really important. You talked about diminish and you were talking about the psychological aspects, but there's also, to me, the real fear that the work will stop, that it will stop, that there is a a risk that products don't get made. Like, so in terms of the that if sometimes as a designer you learn, like, you do check in with people, but people don't always know what they, especially going forward. Like, if you people adapt, so people want what they know is cool. And I've the best example is Apple right now for me. I mean, still among the best examples. If I had if somebody had walked up to you and said, would you, would you buy a gadget that was a phone and was a camera and was a post office, and like, if you explained all of these things that ended up being the iPhone, or people would have looked at you like you were crazy, because they had no capacity to understand that it would be like this, right? They would have thought it was this big clunky thing. Like, at minimum, they would have thought it was the size of a huge camera. Why would I carry that around? I don't want that. I don't want people calling me all day long. I don't want to, I don't want to, I have a perfectly good camera. Why would I want to use something else? People don't know the vision. Like, basically, actually, Henry Ford, right? He said, if I had asked, they would have said they wanted faster horses, because people can only see what they can see, and they can usually jump a little bit, right? So you think of the thing that, like, everyone in social media, even looking at what could be the next best thing. What's going to happen with social? Instagram starting to take away likes, because they're seeing that it's causing a reverse reaction than what they wanted. That people are not as creative because they want the likes, right? So that it's limiting what they're doing with the platform, which is starting to make it boring, because everything is starting to get structured. Like, and I think, to be honest with you, it's another thing. This was Gary Vee was talking about that recently. He's not the only one, but he's the one who speaks about it most consistently. But I think that part of the reason that it starts to be looking like that is so many people, so many coaches, so many marketers, or so many people have sold their templates, their swipe files, their done for you products. So of course they're going to look the same, because they're coming from the same source, right? You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
it's a big world, and I know that's not entirely true, but I think that there's a great deal to it, that if you are a big name and you have a lot of people on your list, then people are going to be they're following that, what I'm called I can't say me too because that has another connotation now, but also also me, right? Otherwise known as the copycat. That it's just like, oh, I'll just take their stuff, like their stuff, and I'll put it in. I'll do it, but it's really not about. It's not even packaged to be inspirational. It's not because they're here are the guidelines. Here's what I'm doing, and I want you to take your magic and your greatness and create something based on this. It really is like, I know you're busy. You can just have this and just put it up. And then things start to, if enough people do that, then all the feeds are going to look the same, right?
Yep.
There's a certain element of that, I think.
There
So
is,
anyway,
and I think, but do you not think that that's symptomatic of us looking in the wrong places to fix our problems? Because
oh,
we think,
absolutely.
hey, if I buy this course, then all my problems will be fixed. If I do these Facebook ads, if I create this webinar, if I do this thing, and or whatever that thing is that's in your mind that needs
Hmm.
doing, I would suggest that 99 times out of 100, perhaps even more, that it's never that thing that needs fixing. It's the internal shift. It's the
It's
label
the
that we
yeah.
attach to the fact. It's back to that deep work that we do within that
Mm,
makes all of the difference. Because do you really want to crank out a webinar that generates a load of sales?
mm,
Do you really want to have a social presence that gets a loads of likes and followers? What
mm,
what for? And what?
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, some people will be going, oh yeah, I want those things. Yeah,
yeah,
I want those things.
yeah,
Why? Why do you want those things? This
yeah.
is back to what you said earlier, Laurie, about the measures of success.
Mm,
Why do you want to do those things? So even in answering that question, and even if your answer to those questions is yes, what you've just done in that little piece there is you have reflected on
mm,
who you are as a human being, what
mm,
drives you, what
mm,
motivates you, what's important to you, what are you looking to achieve, who are you seeking to become. Then the rest
mm,
becomes easy. The rest becomes the mechanical elements of putting that into reality, making that a reality. Okay, so in order for me to do this or be this or become that, I need to run a webinar that gets this message in front of these types of people. And now everything I'm doing, whether I'm taking a course to learn this or I'm researching how to do this in this market, it's all got intent. It's all got purpose. And I think
right.
that's the key difference, isn't it? Is we're
Yes.
not just like copying and taking, oh, let's have that, let's use this, let's play with that.
Yeah.
We're doing everything with intent and purpose. And I
Yeah.
think that's where there's a lot of that work needs to be done. A lot, there's that
Yeah.
can be missing a lot of the times, I
Well,
guess,
I
in
think
life.
it's now this is back to what you were kind of where we were kind of headed with this, and that is, so if you're interested in the likes or you're interested in all these things, you're interested in the status quo of how to do. Status quo is apparently my keyword for today or in this segment. But if you're interested in doing what like best practices, to me, best practices is tricky because what happens best practices is looking at something at a place in time that is now past. So if you do best practices, then you're doing watered down best practices because the people who are creating the best practices are have already finished are already have already turned a corner. They're no longer like once it becomes best practices, usually the people who at least the forerunners are not doing that anymore. You does that make sense?
Yeah, and
So when
you're still
everybody's
part of the
doing
status
everything,
quo. Yeah, you're still
yeah,
a
that's not
cog in the machine,
innovative.
aren't you? You're
Yeah,
not breaking the boundaries. You're
yeah,
not forging ahead into new ground. That's not innovation. That's not the spirit of entrepreneurship, is it? That's just repeating old patterns.
yeah. That's I mean, it might be good business, at some level, like if you're doing certain things that you know that work. But to me, I think it needs to be, well, everybody needs to tap into themselves, like you said, and decide what works for them and what's important for them. But I feel that too many people are working on default and are just like, oh, this is the way you do it. And this is why, oh, well, people are trying to evaluate where you are based on certain outside criteria that might not be your own criteria. So you just have to be aware that that's going to happen, because in the same way that people still come up and ask you, oh, who are you? Where are you from? If you're especially if you're foreign, if you're living in a foreign country, people will probably ask you that. But people will ask you where you're from, I guess, anywhere. They might want to know what part of the country you're from or what part of the city you're from. They might ask you about what you do, but people, it's very rare you're going to walk into a situation where you've just been introduced to someone and they're going to say, what lights you up? What what gives your life meaning? What are you on this world? What are you on this planet for? Like, what do you look, what's your favorite thing to do? It's a totally different conversation, right? It's like, here's my resume, and here's like the trappings of who I am. And then this is actually, I think one is kind of factual, kind of like good practices. I'm doing this on the fly, so I don't know if it makes sense. Kind of like good practices. It's reflectory. Yeah. It's reflecting upon where you've been. Like your resume is what you have done, right? And so I show you what I have done so you can evaluate kind of where I am. But there are people, who do a lot of things, and that's not who they want to be. So isn't it more important to not look at the resume, not look at what have you done, where are you at, and more interesting to know where you want to be, who you want to become.
Depends on the context, doesn't it? Depends on the context, because if that's a conversation with, at a networking event, for example, with potential clients or referrers or clients, it's an
I
entirely
love
different.
cookies.
Yeah. So it does depend on the context, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Depends on the context. If that's in, if it's in a bar in the city or whatever, that's entirely different, isn't it?
Yeah. I think. Well, I'm going to challenge you, because I think as the mindfulness movement grows, or as we become more conscious, that basically some of the things we talked about, because I think increasingly what your skill set is going to become less important than your personality, your aspirations, what you want to accomplish, your ethic about doing things, your these are things that, I mean, I remember human resource work and stuff. Of course, this stuff was important before, but I think it has a new more important element, because in the entrepreneurial world, basically everything you need to do the work you need is there. It's out there somewhere. You can YouTube, Google. I mean, you can get in there resources, or you can pay for resources. But when you are like looking to work with someone or collaborate or something, if if the resources are there, or you have a skill set that's there, but you don't have a like-mindedness about the investment, if you're not on the same page about certain things, if you some of those things like might be revealed, and it doesn't have to be negative. It's just, or that, okay, I'm going to use another example, the tortoise and the hare. So the tortoise and the hare, the story of the tortoise and the hare. Like, who do you think is going to win the race? Obviously, a tortoise is not a real fast creature, and the hare is super fast, right? But who wins the race? The hare wins the race. And I think that's another entrepreneurial message.
No, it doesn't. The tortoise wins the race.
Oh, did I say the hare? Did I say the hare wins the race? I changed it to suit my own
Yeah,
purposes.
that's an interesting story. Tell me.
Yes. Okay. Well, no, I did. I actually messed up, but I have thought about it. I think it's interesting because, again, it's like what I said with the timeline. The tortoise won that race, right?
Mm,
In that story, the tortoise won the race because the hare fell asleep and wasn't paying attention, like, celebrated too early, got lazy, ignored the competition. I mean, these are all good entrepreneurial lessons to be learned.
yeah, I love this story. I think there are my mind's whirring with so many.
So much.
Yeah.
But let's see, for somebody who said she hates realistic, now I really love to say it. But let's be realistic. But
Oh,
if you're
Laurie.
no, no,
No,
no,
no,
no.
no, no,
But
no.
if we're being truthful, the hare is still faster than you still can't say,
Of
like,
course.
so let us
Yeah,
not confuse the story. Like,
yeah.
so the story is really great and rich because it's a good story for if you're not fast, or if you have like, the fact of the matter, doing the work, showing up, hustling, keep going, that will win.
Slow and
But
steady wins the race.
if you compare that with fast and steady will kick your butt every day of the week. I'm sorry. If fast and steady, if fast and slow are doing the same thing, and the evaluation of success is getting done faster, then the hare will win. If fast and slow are there doing the race and getting there getting there in the longest amount of time, then the tortoise might win the race because the hare might burn out,
So
right?
here's the
So
thing.
it depends
Yeah.
on what it's again back to perspective and evaluation of success.
Also, yeah. Well, I love this story because if you think about it, why are we measuring winning or losing by crossing that finish line? If you
Yes.
look at the hare sleeps, thinks, yeah, this is not a problem to me, and he looks around and he enjoys his environment, and then he's like, yep, 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 and he knows he can sprint and get to that finish line like
Yeah.
super fast. That's his skill. That's his gift. But
But he
he doesn't
waited.
do it. Is that good or
No,
bad?
but he waited. No, but he waited. No, the lesson is the lesson has not been lost on the hare. That this is so actually it's such a good one. It really is such a good one. It's
Mm.
one of the richest parables or whatever to ever exist, because if you start really dissecting it and you think about it, it actually is a story of being humble to a certain extent, like that
Mm.
the hare got ahead of himself, like, ooh, I am so awesome, I got this, and come on, this isn't even a race, like, dissing the turtle or the tortoise, and then the tortoise mindset, dedication, hard, like, but this is also who told the story is the society that wants those skills to be rewarded. So
Yep.
if somebody else had told the story, then the tortoise would not have won the race. If the hare had written the story, the hare would have gotten a shock, would have thought, I'm about to lose the race, but then would have just at the end.
Well,
That's a
listen.
different story. No.
Also,
Yes.
why is it wrong for the
The
hare
tortoise.
to
Oh.
daydream?
Um,
Yeah.
well, because you know why? Because this goes back to one that you like. Focus. The hare's come on. Are we running a race or are we taking a picnic? Like certain times the
Mm.
entrepreneur can go and sit down and take a picnic. When you're a little ahead of the game, you've earned your right to take a break. However, there are moments where it is go time. You don't have time. You cannot take a break. You need to finish the race and then take the break,
Well,
right?
I think we need to be both the hare and the tortoise at times, don't we? And but
Yeah.
the difficulty, And I have this, right? If you don't take those plodding steps that the tortoise is taking, you
Yep.
then you beat yourself up, and you end up not making progress forward at all, because you're
Yep.
like, oh man, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, and then you get stuck in this negative loop, don't you? Of, oh man, your belief takes a knock, your ability to plod,
Yeah.
that ability like diminishes as a result, doesn't it?
Well, I think also the key thing is that when you say the plotting, that the the good story, the main story is, like you said, steady wins the race, is that it's encouraging people to keep going, and it doesn't matter how fast you go, right? That it isn't about that it's not about speed. The person may look like they're going faster than you. The person may look like they're better suited to the job than you. But if you stick
Mm.
with it, if you're dedicated, you have as much potential to win, because also the story, and as a runner, um, on any given day, even if you're like, if you're, the daydreaming doesn't have to occur as in, I leave the, I mean, you would have actually, he would have been disqualified. The hare would have been disqualified. He didn't even have to finish the race, right? Because if he left the you know left his lane, he was out. That's a whole different thing. So again, it's on following rules. So the hare is this fast, slick, playing by their own rules, taking breaks, celebrating ahead of time. There's a lot of things that make the hare look like not a good stand up competitor. But there are way, I mean, so for the story, it's very good to show these aspects. But also, I think that again, it's down to which race you're in and what the timing is. But I think mentally, the hare, it's a story, a word of caution for entrepreneurs as well. The entrepreneurs are actually on both ends, by the way. When I say, I keep talking about the hare, like the hare is the entrepreneur, but the tortoise is also the entrepreneur.
Oh,
They're both,
it's
right?
both. That's the dichotomy of this, isn't it?
That's
That's the
yeah. So
mm.
it's to know when you have to sprint and when you need to trot along. But I was thinking another thing that normally people I've never heard anybody dissect the tortoise and the hare in the way that I love to do it. I
But,
obsess over
but
things.
also when you need to leave the lane altogether and stare at the stars, that's just as important, and fall asleep, right?
Yeah, well,
All of these things are valid.
I'm still thinking not during the race though.
Why not? Why not? I thought, listen, we're challenging the status quo. Why not?
That's
Why
true.
not?
That's true. Why not? Why not?
Why
Yeah.
not?
So the time, but the thing I wanted to say though that I thought was from a productivity standpoint is also that you can lose the race by not being in the game, not taking a break, but wandering.
Mm.
So they actually, if they took the hare and he wasn't taking an actual break, like you need a break, which I think like what you're proposing is a healthy thing. But if the break is actually metaphorical, that he's not taking a break as much as he's wandering, that he's not back to the focus. He's doing a task, but he's not paying attention to the task. Then he can of course get to the end, but he will not be as if the criteria is efficiency, then you act accordingly, right? If the task is creativity, you act accordingly. If the if the if the task is balance, you act accordingly. So it's I think the tortoise and the hare discussion of like going through it, it's good. It brings up a lot of points about how we are as either the tortoise type or the hare type. And I like to think about this because I was in a relationship with a hare for a long time, and he liked to move slowly, and he was very very talented and very effective in what he did. I was also very talented and effective with what I did, but there was a lot of friction in how we would when we were trying to move through things together in planning, because I think not because anybody was inherently wrong, but because the timing. So when somebody moves slowly and they're with somebody who moves fast. So I'm thinking from entrepreneurial teams or groups, then you get like stress exists when you're in a team that has fast and slow, energies. There will be stress, because for the slow person, they'll be stressed because they're always feeling like you're pulling them. Come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. Fast, fast, fast. But and people often acknowledge that. Many people see that. Oh, it's really stressful. The fast person is pulling somebody, and it's stressful for them, and that's unfortunate for the person who's moving slowly. But contrary, it's the same for the person who moves fast. It's the same stress. It's like what we talked about earlier. It's the facts, it's the labels you put on it. If somebody moves fast and they have to wait, they get distracted. That's why the hare is the original ADD member of society. He was moving. He was like, "Where are you, turtle? Are we running a race? What are we doing? What's happening?" I need to do something else, because while I'm waiting for you, right? And so I think of like wow, I need a psychiatrist apparently. But I think of myself when, and tell me if you've ever tried it. You go on the computer and you get this one. It's thinking. Do you watch it think? Or do you think, I'll just check that email? Or wait a minute, let me just let me just check Facebook while it's, that's me. That is you being your hair. That is the hair in you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
I love that. I love that.
So yes.
I love that. Or even if if there's an update happening to something and you chat for a time, we all do it, don't we? We all do
I
it.
think so.
That's the beauty, but also the curse of the world that we live in, Laurie, isn't it?
It is. I remember dial-up. I'm sorry, or like you said. And so the funny thing is also how it affects us in terms of like our brains. So I can tell you, where I used to live as a kid. I can give you the address. I can give you the phone numbers of my best friends from when I was a kid. I could not tell you the most important phone numbers. I only know my sister's phone number by heart, who lives in the States. I only know her phone number, and I know it, but it's like I can rattle off the number, my childhood phone number, faster than I can my sister's phone number.
Yeah.
And that is insane. Like, because, and to be honest, back to management by distraction in my total hair persona, I spend more time redirecting PIN codes than I do work in the course of a day.
What do you mean by redirecting PIN codes?
I can't remember how to log into anything.
Oh, password.
I end up going back and forth to, whatever my email is that I have attached to the account. To me, I've gotten to the point that it's faster to reset it than
to figure out what it is.
And to figure it out, because in the beginning it was easy. In the beginning, I was good with all the different codes, and I had because there weren't that many. But again, as a super user, as someone who has tried to conquer the internet by signing up for everything possible, I have too much information and I can't remember. And now they've gotten so, because of the way they do the codes, like if you say, like, if you can't remember your code, you can't just, tag it in, and then you realize, that was the code. Well, now you've ruined it, because now they're like, you can't reuse that code. We know you tried to sign in, but you forgot. So
you've got to have a special character. You've got to have numbers. You've got to have a capital letter,
and it's not consistent. And so the other thing is that I want to know before I'm making the code, and before I'm reminded to make the code again, I want it up there, the reminder, like kind of, okay, prepare yourself for a session, because you're going to plug in about 5 in my case, because now I've done this so many times, it's like you can't use that code. You've used it before. You've used, like, and because you're like trying to think of things you're going to, and depending on the time, like if you're setting up something new and doing a lot at once, if you're not paying attention, then your brain locks it, and then you're really in trouble because it doesn't, like before, if you're paying attention, you're present, you make the code, you have a system to the code, you have a system to it, you can remember it, you can connect it. But the problem is when you're going through a lot of things in the course of a short amount of time, and there's many of them, then you can't remember which, like that's for me. Like I'll go through, it's very rare that I have the luxury of, okay, I can't get into this account, I'll put in a new code, and that's all I've done that day, is replace one code.
You need some software for that,
Yes, but I see, here's the thing. I bought software for it. I spent all of the time working the software, and then I got locked out of it.
And you couldn't remember your password for the
I couldn't
password
get it,
software.
and it wouldn't let me in
That's funny.
ever again. So
That's
I mean,
funny.
like at some point, because I was going through and I was documenting everything. So like I said, I wasn't being conscious of mine, and I wrote it down somewhere, but I just never found out where. And I think this is also, people, entrepreneurs, be aware in terms of your passcodes, and also in terms of, because of how we're living now, this idea that it's such a service, it's so helpful for us to take all of your information, have you put everything up in the cloud. Um, it's dangerous, probably on many levels, but it's dangerous for you in terms of your productivity and your ability to access things. And also, especially the easiest one is like with the pictures, right? So you take your pictures, and let's say you go out and you do a shoot, you're going to be using it for content creation, and you upload your pictures, and it's saved in the cloud, right? It's saved somewhere. But if you're not careful, it doesn't save at the best resolution, because it's trying to also limit your limit, or you might have ticked it to limit it so that you don't have to keep paying for more cloud space, more cloud space. Basically, the internet has become the outside world, especially in America, where over the last decade or so, houses have gotten bigger, and the purchase of storage rental has also gotten bigger. So people have more space, but because they have so much junk, they don't have the space in their house to store their junk, and they're outsourcing the storage, and it's being placed, and they're paying for the rental space. And it's kind of happening in this whatever cyberspace, that now, our computers keep getting bigger, the phones keep getting bigger, everything's stored. I remember, my first Mac was, I think it was 4 megabytes. It's a floppy disk, which we don't have floppy disk.
Yeah. Floppy disk,
They were
1.4,
things
even
that we used.
yeah.
Yes, that was 4 floppy disks. Yes, people,
Yeah.
it was a thing we used back in the day. You don't need to know. But it wasn't a big computer. It seemed like I couldn't use that thing up. Right? I never used that one up, but I get my last 3 computers, I have tapped out. I have just overwhelmed it with information. So we keep get it more and more and more and more and more. And the challenge is going to be, how do you navigate in the dark? How do you navigate? Because when you have physical clutter, you can actually sort through. I mean, it's a nightmare, but you can sort through it. But it's almost impossible to sort through clutter you can't see, but it's there. And anybody who's ever had too much stuff on a hard disk, or like on a computer where it's like running low, and then you have to instantly like delete stuff, and you're like, well, I don't know which, like, oh, the big, like the files, you start deleting stuff because you need space. And if you're really in a pressured situation, you might be deleting important things, because you're basing it on the amount of space, not necessarily the you know, the quality or the importance of what it is. You're just trying to, like, I need to dump a lot of space like quick, and then you'll like dump something, and it doesn't always the backup doesn't always work to plan, and the only time you'll ever know it is once you need it, because I've also had that happen. So, you know, backup disks, Apple backup, the Apple backup thing they have. I can't think of the name of it. And then I was like, oh, I need to go and pick that
Time
up.
machine.
The time machine. Yes, I had a
Yeah.
time machine. The time machine died. So too bad for
Hmm.
me. And then I went to check something, and I went back in the time machine. And, you know, you just can't, like, in terms of again, this is an example of some of the stress that's related to the technologies. Because if you want to make sure that your stuff is always being saved, again, if it's clutter, like if you have junk, or like if I've written a notebook, I can put it on the bookshelf, or I can put it in a box, or I can put it somewhere, but I can actually look through it and find it. But when I upload it and think it's in the time machine, safe in the time machine, I would have to check every time I did an update. I'd have to check that it was still in the time machine, so that I knew, like, so you end up backing up, backing up, backing up, and the amount of stress on trying to manage that, to find out also later that it didn't get uploaded in the time machine. Sound like
Yeah.
a crazy person? Yes.
No, but these things, they do, in whatever form they take, they cause stress, don't they? They cause stress and anxiety, which doesn't allow you to do your best work. If you're spending half your time with a distraction of one form or another, whether it's looking for
Yeah.
a password or whatever, it's a
Yeah.
distraction, isn't it? It's stopping you from doing that all
You just
important
want to
work.
try, you just want to get in and find out something,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Sometimes it's just a quick thing that suddenly takes, you know, 5 minutes maybe, but 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, you know, it adds up. And it's not the time as much as it's the feeling. And like,
mm,
and if you're not if you're not having a good mindset day, then you're like beating yourself in the head over, like, why can't I remember this? And ugh, now I got to
and
do this, and I'm
then
wasting time, and
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
the negativity downhill cycle, right?
absolutely. And then, no matter how hard you
Downhill
try, it
cycle.
becomes difficult to be the tortoise, doesn't it? The turtle,
Yeah.
and take those steps to make progress.
You feel like, actually, like the hair is throwing things at you now. Come on, tortoise. I can run faster with one shoe. Boom.
I
I used
like
to
that.
play a game on the on the Wii. We used to
Yeah,
play. Have you ever played the Wii games?
yeah. We've played quite a few. Yeah.
Did you play the one where they have the soccer or the football, footy,
Oh no, I don't.
and
Oh
they
yes. Where
and
you
yes,
move side to
yeah,
side as the ball
exactly.
comes at
And the
you.
ball.
Yes, yes.
I am actually a comedy playing that game.
Do you
I take
headbutt the
it.
shoes instead of the balls, Laurie, when they
I
come?
was I would hit both of them, but I would it was like, it was real. Like, when it would hit me, my head would go back. Like, my kids were like, "Mom, what are you doing?" And like, and then I would hit, like, because I also played footy before, so I was like, I would really like try to head the ball, like a little
Yeah,
too, you know, embodied what we action.
I
So
like it. I like it.
yes.
I like it.
So we are actually coming up upon the end of segment one,
Yeah,
which makes
that's
me
gone
sad
fast.
because you're leaving.
That's gone fast, man. That's gone
Yeah.
fast. Uh, so,
So
so what's coming up, Laurie? What are we playing with in the next segments over the course of
yes,
today?
yes. Well, in the next segment, I will be here. I am going to, like, in terms of, I'm going to probably have to go to the bathroom and come back and get a drink, and
Mhm.
not an alcoholic drink, but just some water. And I'm going to be speaking about. I'm going to pull up productivity, talk productivity, do a little exercise about that. I'm going to be pulling up some information about events that are happening around town. in Copenhagen, and also look at what's happening in this time zone in general, what's happening in Central Europe and in the UK. Looking to see, just kind of looking in on GEW and giving people some incentives, seeing if anybody wants to jump on and get some coaching, or have some questions, or just have a conversation about entrepreneurship in general, and about Global Entrepreneurship Week, about the hotline, the Entrepreneur Hotline. And then we will be meeting up in 3 hours again,
Mhm.
Gail, Colin, and I, to have a forum of the three hosts, meeting, chatting, talking a little bit more about what and why we are into this. Gail will take over that segment and run with it, sharing with you her expertise and her presence, because also part of the thing is, like, also with me and with you, Colin, basically the three of us are here in a hosting capacity. We will also have moments where we're sharing our expertise, but the main purpose of the Entrepreneur Hotline is that it is a combination of different elements, and that includes some of the things Colin and I were talking about earlier, basically being here for support in the way you would expect a hotline to run. That it isn't because it's nonstop expertise in your face all the time. It's as important that somebody's here in case you have a question, that somebody's here to talk with you about various aspects of the entrepreneurial journey, and to also talk to you about resources and share ideas and just to be present. The experts who come on, of course, are coming on as experts and guests, so they will be speaking about specific content, and some of that's going to be coming up later. I'm actually not looking at this. Are you looking at the screen by chance? Because
I
I
was
have to
trying to
look
have a
over.
little look, yeah, and I need to just
Because
I can't,
also
yeah.
I have more of an overview right now, in terms of the hosting, how we're rotating, and then you come on after Gail. So in 6 hours, Colin comes on and is doing a segment himself. And throughout the first part of the day, then we are populated, on screen, doing a lot of things, able to address your needs. And in the latter half of the day, we're working from our time. Colin and I are in UK and Central European time. But in the latter half of the day, then we will have content that's actually being repurposed and sent. And there will be a host that comes on to introduce the segment and will be available as possible, but will not be on the full 3 hours in front of you like this. They could be on doing some other working and being available if you have a call, in much the way a call center would be. It's much more hotline in the second half of the day than it is in the first half of the day, if that makes sense to people. Yeah.
Makes sense to me. Hopefully makes sense to everybody else. Yeah.
Yes. And please keep in mind that this is a pilot project, and we want your feedback, we want your engagement, we want to know what we can bring. Like this, it's been created with some flexibility, quite a bit of flexibility, because of the fact that we want to not limit the possibilities of what this could be and what it could be. So please join in if you're an expert in an area, or if you want to, if you have a perspective that you'd like to share, then also reach out to us through social, directly through the Entrepreneur Hotline, at gmail.com, because that's going to be the one that that we have the eyes on the most. Sign in at theentrepreneurhotline.com, through the summit directly, and you'll be able to see the schedule, and that will be being updated, and you can get speaker bios and all that good stuff. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you.
So, are you going to take a short break now and then start the next segment? How are we going to play that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Then I will hop back on in a few short minutes. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay, and I'll see you in a short while.
All right. Cheers. Bye.
Beautiful. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I am going to, maybe I should make a little thing for you to say short break. Short break. Is that a good idea? Oh.